There were reports that I was seeing, conflicting reports that some of the jurors were crying yesterday. Is that true?
I did not see that. And I also did not see the juror move the tissue box over. I've heard conflicting reports it was over to Jim Griffin or to Alec, but I didn't see either one of those things. Today, still just we're going through the muck right now. They're very attentive at times, seem a little bit bored with things, but then the next second later, right back to perky and all ears. I think it's just kind of dragging on, and we're getting into some repetition, which I noticed a few times the jury just kind of gets lost when he's re-asking a question that he's asked 3 or 4 times already. It's kind of the most of what I'm seeing today.
Michael, it does seem very repetitive. They got way into the weeds yesterday with the cross-examination about the financial crimes. I don't know how many times Alec Murdaugh could have said, yeah, I did it. Yeah, I did it. I mean, he basically admitted to stuff that's going to send him to prison for the rest of his life with these financial crimes. So do you think that the pace of the cross-examination has improved today? Or are we getting stuck in too many things?
Well, it's definitely better today. I think it was a huge mistake yesterday for the prosecution to focus on all the financial stuff. If you had just tuned in, if you'd been under that rock somewhere, this must be a case about a guy who screwed over his clients. Look at that. Right. It was just way too much. And we knew it was coming.
We're going to listen to this for a few minutes here.
And move on. There's been a little better.
I'm going to get him to stretch my legs a little bit
today by the prosecution.
Also, I need to take my dog out to go to the bathroom. So
I don't know.
Tight, guys, and
on the timeline is as
share the stream if you would, please. Let's get everybody back in here.
Drudgery of the financial stuff. We get it.
Thank you guys.
He cheated people. He knows it. He's never going to see the light of day as a result of either this trial or the financial crimes
No, I don't
trial.
get no sleep.
We got it. Let's figure out who killed Maggie and Paul. And I think they've definitely done a better job.
Lighting doesn't help either, but
today
no, I don't get no sleep.
To it.
Not nearly enough.
Tracy, one of the things that I think the prosecution has to get across, and it's confounding to me because Alec Murdaugh, he basically admitted to these financial crimes. The state basically has him dead to right on those. He can't deny that stuff. It's all there in black and white, the paper trail. He admitted with the confession of judgment to stealing the money from the estate of Gloria Satterfield, his former nanny and housekeeper. But I have to think there might be some jurors that are thinking like, wow, he's sitting here and saying, yeah, I stole millions of dollars, but he's not saying I killed my wife and son. I was on drugs. I did something terrible. So what's the difference? He's going to prison for the rest of his life either way. How do you think the prosecution is doing at, selling that, yeah, he stole millions of dollars and he's telling you he did this. He's denying he did this, but he still did it because that's their position, that he murdered his wife and son. He just won't fess up to it.
So I think that that's an excellent question, Anjanette, and I think it's one that is weighing high in the jury's minds because you know what? Just because you've committed a financial crime doesn't not make you a murderer, and those are two extremely different things, two extremely different actions. And I do think if he did do it, again, it's all just alleged at this point. If he did do it, there is an element of shame that is attached to it. He's not completely devoid of emotion, and I think it's much easier to sort of remove yourself and your emotions and that element of shame from a financial crime than it is from murdering your own flesh and blood. And so I think that's part of the issue. What I do think the prosecution is doing, though, I completely agree with Michael, they got far too much in the weeds of it yesterday. What I think they are doing and what I think their strategy was to take all of that financial crime information, particularly having to do with the victims, particularly, in terms of lying straight to their faces. I think what he's trying to say is that takes a special kind of person to be able to do that. A lot of times at the FBI, when we do white collar crime, financial crime, those kinds of things, it is somewhat removed. You're not sitting in front of someone's face and lying to them. A lot of it's taking place online through electronic transfers. And I think that's what he's trying to show is that he does have the capability to do that. Although I'm not certain that the prosecution is doing the best job. They keep kind of going back to, why have you lied about this and not everything else? And so I think they're having a tough time with that.
And I think there's just so much that goes on in this case. And Creighton Waters runs the grand jury for the South Carolina Attorney General's office. So he's got everything in the kitchen sink up here when he's probably just needs an outline down here of, we need to focus on what this is about, because I'm hearing a lot more about financial stuff than I am about the homicides. at least today we got into the homicides a little more. Let's get to some of our questions. You guys are sending them in and keep them coming on Twitter, Facebook, and in our YouTube chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Gigi, the first one comes from Jod Foster, at Jod Foster from Twitter. Is the jury buying it? That's who matters here. Are you seeing anybody who looks skeptical? Or are you seeing anybody who looks like they're buying what Alec Murdaugh is selling?
It's hard to tell. I mean, for the most part, it's very much poker face. But you do see these little subtle things. I mean, for instance, yesterday, a lot of people have been talking about that passing of the tissue. I mean, is that just kind of like an instinct to do it? Or was it, hey, man, you're sobbing. I feel bad for you. Here's a tissue. It's hard to tell if they're buying it or not. You see frustration kind of come in waves across that jury, depending on the line of questioning. But as far as what they're thinking, man, I wish I could hop in their brains for a hot second for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's hard to tell. And just giving somebody a tissue doesn't mean that you necessarily believe them. But if you think that their emotion is authentic and you are a human being, I think any of us would naturally grab for a box of tissues and pass them over to the person who was upset. Let's get to the next question. Hope Lackey from YouTube asks, do you think Alec Murdaugh giving testimony yesterday about threats that Paul was getting was to give jury reasonable doubt? Michael, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the defense theories all along, is that, there was such animosity built up over what Paul allegedly did in driving the boat drunk, leading to the death of the friend. And people want somebody to pay. So it's not a great argument, but certainly the attempt by the defense is to lay that out there for the jury. You only need one person to cling to that, to turn this into a hung jury and maybe a potential retrial. I don't think that's going to sway 12 people, to be honest with you. I think it's a little weak, but there's no doubt the defense is going to use that as one of their weapons.
The Deal Master from YouTube asks Tracy, in your opinion, has Alec taking the stand helped or hurt his case?
Personally, I feel that it's hurt his case. I think he at times appears combative. I think he's caught himself in several lies and several missteps. And I think he sort of comes across as at times sincere, when he is crying over, finding his son. But at other times, I think he comes across as somewhat entitled, somewhat annoyed. And he's really entrapped himself and backed himself into a corner with a very small window of time now based on the digital footprint of all of the phones. And so I really think that he taking the stand has really exposed him to the full force of the prosecution. And whether the prosecution has been clear or not and focused too much on the financial crimes or not, the reality is he's really backed himself into the corner in terms of digital evidence right now.
Good point. There's a lot of digital evidence in this case, an overwhelming amount. And I kind of wonder sometimes if the jury is overwhelmed by it, or if they just take a big picture view and say, okay, yeah, his phone was here and then it was there, and this, that, and the other. Gigi, Adriana Sacido from YouTube asks, what happened right after the jury left the courtroom with the officer? We kind of heard the officer, the bailiff, somebody say something to the judge. So what happened there?
Yeah, so they escorted the jury out of the courtroom, and after about 20 seconds, he came back in, just walked straight up to the judge's podium and whispered in his ear. He was there about 15, 20 seconds, and then nothing was said. The judge adjourned us for lunch. So hopefully it's nothing bad since he came out with the jury, or he went out with the jury. Let's cross our fingers. We have two alternates. So let's not, have anything happen today on a Friday, especially, right? But yeah, so that's all we know is everybody was kind of whispering like, what's going on? So maybe we'll hear something. I'll bring it to you if we do.
Yeah, let's hope nobody's feeling a little under the weather, has the sniffles, and we have to do some emergency COVID tests. Oh my gosh, could you imagine? All right, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Keep the questions coming to us. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you're watching Law and Crime. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you are watching Law and Crime, and we are taking your questions during this lunch hour. So keep them coming to us on Twitter, Facebook, and in the YouTube chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. We want to bring you an update on a question we asked in the last block before the commercial break, and that was, what was the judge why was the sheriff's deputy or bailiff whispering to the judge? Well, we found out during the commercial break that what was going on was they need people to stay in the courtroom until they move Alec Murdaugh out of there, because they were getting reports about people trying to hand him stuff and stuff like that. So it's just a little bit of a reminder to the judge. Everybody needs to be still until Alec gets out of there, the jury, and then everybody can walk out of the courtroom. So no emergency COVID issues or anything like that. Everything appears to be okay. Joining us now is Joe McCullough. He is a former law partner of Dick Harpootlian, who is Alec Murdaugh's lead attorney, and he's with us outside of the courthouse. He's also suing Alec Murdaugh as part of the boat crash that Paul was involved in back in 2019. So Joe, I have to get your thoughts right off the bat now. I need to know like what you think of what the cross is like. It sounds like Creighton Waters has gotten into the homicides, obviously, the day of the homicides more. We're not hearing as much about the financial crimes as we were yesterday. So your take on what we're seeing on Cross, how is Alec Murdaugh doing?
Well, I think, frankly, Alec Murdaugh is tired and he's beginning to break down a bit. Creighton scoring some points. There have been a couple of important things done, and when we broke for the lunch hour, Creighton was going second by second to say, when did the big lie start? If you can't really tell, we're going to watch this video of that first statement, that first interview, until you can tell this jury when you invented the big lie. And that's pretty effective. And he's also laying out this morning earlier and yesterday this, you looked them in the eye and lied to them. All of these financial victims, you looked them in the eye and you lied to them. And I suspect in the closing argument, that's going to reverberate, and you're going to hear, you looked Pawpaw in the eye as you blew his brains out. You looked at your wife, Maggie, in the eye as you shot her down like a dog. I think he's doing things. He'll never be accused of not being methodical, but he's effective today.
One of the things that stuck out to me was the fact that Creighton Waters asked him, Joe, if he could remember his last conversation with Maggie. And he said he could, but he didn't say what it was. Also, he was asked, when you just got the chicken out of Bubba's mouth, you just put the chicken down and you just kind of get out of there? And he's like, did you say bye to them? He's like, I would have said bye to them. He didn't say, yes, of course I said bye. Like, hey, I'm going back to the air conditioning. He said, I would have. And I don't know if that's a tell or if that's the way Alec Murdaugh talks. What do you think?
Well, I think that the jury is going to take into account, and they'll certainly be reminded by the defense in closings, this is a fellow who came upon a family slaughtered, and he was not asked by the investigator, tell me in chronological order, in perfect order, what you did, when you did it, and exactly what you said. That's not the way things happen. Police officers, as a matter of fact, when they're involved in the shooting, they get a 24-hour hiatus before they're interviewed about the shooting to give them time to collect their thoughts. So kind of a different standard for witnesses or victims in crimes, people who come upon things. So I think the jury's not going to give much credence to that quote-unquote problem. But I think what's happening in there now about when the big lie got invented and tightening this timeline and challenging Alec to explain it, that's going to help the prosecution.
Yeah, it's a tight timeline. 8:44 kennel video, 8:49 the phone's lock. After the video, you got to get the chicken out of Bubba's mouth and then get in the golf cart and go back to the air conditioning minute by minute. It's a tight timeline for sure. Let's take a look at some of the testimonies. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I make one point while we're there talking about Bubba and whatever that other dog's name is? a telling moment.
Bubba and Grady and the chicken.
That,
the chicken is unnamed. Right. Go ahead.
There you go. We haven't given the chicken a name, but cocky. But the point I'm making is you can see the fatigue in Alec's answers. And one moment that I thought was telling and helpful to the prosecution was when Alec said, and in response to a question by the prosecution, the dogs didn't sense anybody they didn't know.
Yeah.
The dogs didn't sense assassins hidden in the bushes is the subtext there. And you'll hear that in hopefully early next week in closings.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, these are dogs that are high strung. We've heard that too. So you would think they might be able to sense that, especially because I think they had to go over and relieve themselves by the pines, if I recall that correctly. Let's take a look at some of the cross-examination from Alec Murdaugh or by Alec Murdaugh, and we'll talk about it.
All right, so Will, let's, you want to say a minute? Does that sound about right?
A minute for what?
To have just whatever interaction it took for you to then, according to your new story, drive back to.
No, sir. It wouldn't have taken me a minute. It would have been, it would have been, I'm leaving. I'll see you in a minute.
Okay. So 30 seconds?
I don't think it would have taken 30 seconds, but I mean, I'm fine with you using whatever time you want to apply.
Well,
but I don't think
I'm just asking about
long.
real life here and how people interact with one another, Mr. Murdaugh. I mean, so what you're telling this jury, I call you're fuzzy on these kind of details, is that you jetted down there, you dealt with the chicken and jetted right back.
No, sir. No, sir. I didn't jet down there and I didn't jet back. I got up after Maggie asked me to leave, after Maggie asked me to go with her, and I didn't. I got up. I went and got on a golf cart. I drove down there. I did what I did. I said, I'm leaving or something to those words, and I went back.
All right.
Michael Bryant, he said, I'm leaving or whatever, and I went back. Alec Murdaugh does not like to be hot. We've heard that on Sunday. He didn't want to be out in the heat. And on Monday night, he didn't want to be out in the heat either. So what do you make of that? Because he's got to get the chicken out of Bubba's mouth and then say whatever he says to Maggie and get back to the house. It's a tight timeline.
It's sweltering there in June. So, see you guys later. What would that take? A second and a half? So I think the prosecution was maybe trying to make more out of this than they needed to. I don't think you're going to get 30 seconds into your timeline by the whatever he said when he left. So I don't think that was a big hit. I do think the prosecution made some hay, though, with that 4-minute period of time when he was allegedly back at the house. 283 steps were taken, and there was no good explanation as to what he was doing. And we have to assume these phones. I don't worship the cell phones, as many people know. But I think that there is some validity to the movement issue. And unless you could prove that 283 steps was simulated somehow and they weren't real steps, how do you explain that? What was he doing? What was happening to him and the phone during that 4-minute window? So I think that was a big win. I don't think the, hey, I got to get out of here was much of anything, really.
Let's get to your questions now. Tracy Walder is a former CIA agent and a former FBI agent, spy/cop. I mean, so she's got a lot of things going on, a lot of intuition, I think. This question comes to you from Mr. Russian Blue from YouTube. Why would you lie after finding your own loved ones murdered? And this goes to Alec Murdaugh talking about lying about being at the kennels. He got paranoid, all of that stuff. I mean, is it possible, Tracy, that you're in the police car talking to the SLED agents and you're just thinking to yourself, oh my God, I was just down there. They're going to pin this on me. Is that possible?
It very well could have been possible. I mean, nothing's outside of the realm of possibility. But then he also went on to say that he didn't trust SLED. And I find that to be a very interesting statement, given the fact that really his family, for the better part of a few decades, has had enjoyed a very close relationship with SLED. If anything, it would have been motivation not to lie to SLED. And also, just in looking at his composure inside, when he was inside of the police vehicle with his attorney and 2 other officers, he is pretty calm and methodical. He does break down a little bit, but there really is no reason for him to sort of say that he was feeling paranoid. He didn't look paranoid, quite frankly. And so I think the fact that he chose to lie about this specific detail is highly suspicious. Also, we have to think about the fact, I know a lot was made out of the clothes, and I'm not sure how much validity I really put into that. But this is a person who he has said on the stand now that he tried to roll Paul over, knowing that Paul was dead. He would have been covered in blood, given Paul's wounds. And this is a person who thought enough ahead to go and change his clothes and wash his hands. So he was thinking one step ahead. I'm not certain that he came to the conclusion that they were going to pin it on him. I think that the reason that he ultimately lied is because he didn't want to put himself right at a scene of a crime that he may have committed.
I still have a question about the shooting of Paul, and I don't want to be too explicit, but there was a biological material, I'll steal a word from one of the law partners, all over the place. And how I heard somebody say that if you shot Paul, that would be everywhere, and it would be in your hair, it would be all over the place. So I still need to figure out how you would clean yourself up that quickly from that type of thing, because that would be incredible, an incredible amount of stuff going on. More questions now. Bread from YouTube with a capital E. Gigi, could Alec Murdaugh essay-style answers be hurting the prosecution? Seems like Waters should be doing a better job of shutting him down. Is the jury reacting? Is anybody in the courtroom kind of reacting when Alec Murdaugh kind of expounds and goes on these kind of, all this extraneous information that he provides?
I really haven't seen much reaction from the jury about that, but it's not a bad thing for the prosecution. You give a man the open forum, he might trip up and say something that he doesn't intend to if he gets on a roll. So I'm not sure backing it up is necessarily best for the prosecution. He's a liar. We know that. So the longer you give him to answer and just let him have the floor, maybe he slips up and says something that they can jump right on. You never know.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm wondering if Jim Griffin's going to come back and say, Alec, you've admitted to lying. Why should anybody believe you now? It's kind of the question I would ask, and see what his answer is. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get to more of your questions. Stay with us. You're watching Law and Crime. Welcome back. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you're watching Law and Crime, and we're taking your questions. We are in the lunch hour in the state of South Carolina versus Alec Murdaugh. So let's get straight to the questions because we have a lot of really good ones. Joe, I'm going to send this question over to you. Did defense attorney Jim Griffin make a huge error in objecting in front of the jury with a Fifth Amendment objection? Doesn't this stick in the minds of jurors about self-incrimination? And I could have sworn this happened, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, when Alec was like saying, I wanted to talk to you guys. Jim and Dick reached out to you. I wanted to talk to you about the financial crimes and all of this stuff. So was that a mistake that Jim Griffin did talking about Fifth Amendment in the objection?
Well, it raises an interesting question, and one I don't exactly know the answer to. At the time of this statement, Alec Murdaugh was an uncharged potential suspect, and the question is whether the Fifth Amendment applies in that setting. Is he permitted to refuse to answer without a specific invocation? It gets very technical. Whether Griffin should have objected as he did, I think he really had to. Even though it may underscore to some extent for the jury, I think he has to do that to protect this record. And when we come back, they're going to put that on the record at some point today. A little more discussion of that.
Oh, so that's what he wanted to discuss. That would make sense because I want to hear a little bit more about that and what was going on with that. Let's get to the next question. Tom Kaiser from YouTube asks, Michael Bryant, is everyone getting lost in the sauce with proving motive? I didn't think in South Carolina you had to prove motive. I can see showing some of the reasoning, but sometimes you can't explain crazy in all caps. Is the prosecution getting lost in the sauce, as Tom says, Michael?
Yeah, interesting way to put it. I mean, yeah, in most places you don't have to prove motive. It's used, if anything, to show intent. And, how did you get there? It's a human reaction. We want to know why somebody does something. But I think they're doing the best they can with what they've got. We've said from day one, motive is horrible in this case because it's so hard for us to comprehend killing close family members because you're in financial trouble. I'll go kill the person who's maybe holding the money over my head. Why would I kill my family because of that? Even if you factor in the drug issue, which we've now learned a little more about, that both Paul and Maggie did learn that Alec had this major drug issue. We now know some of the numbers of the pills, up to 100 a day. We were talking about that early on when we didn't know the numbers. Now the addict is telling us himself. So it doesn't surprise me the prosecution is doing what they can to create and develop this motive. They need to help the jury understand. So I don't fault them for that. It's just I don't think they have that much to work with.
I almost felt like they might have been looking for a new motive or looking to sandwich something onto the financial motive with the whole detoxing in the hotel room and feeling sick and being agitated. Was Alec Murdaugh dope sick on that Monday, June 7th? I felt like they were kind of looking for that. Let's get to our next question. It comes from Man Nam from YouTube. Creighton should ask, why would you be paranoid about telling the police you were at the kennels? How would you know what time they were murdered? Good question, Tracy.
I think that's really what the point that I've been trying to make is why would that be something that you would lie about? That would then infer that you knew that the murders were committed during that very short time frame. I think that the reason he felt that he had to come forward, I'm not sure he would have ever come forward with this, or if it would have ever come out, quite frankly, in the trial, if his voice hadn't been heard on the Snapchat. The reality is he'd probably be home free, quite frankly, because his location is very much explainable away. Yes, cell phone data is great, but anyone could be in possession of his cell phone and walking it around those 200 plus steps. So really, we have to remember the only reason that he, lied, and the only reason that he is coming forward now with this lie is because he got caught red-handed with his voice on this Snapchat video.
All right, let's get to another question. Gigi, we don't have a lot of time. Pam Carrollton Lane from Facebook. Why is Creighton Waters letting him ramble on? He needs to demand that he answer the question and nothing else.
I mean, it just kind of goes back to that previous question. You give somebody enough rope. he's a talker, and that's what he did for a living. He's a lawyer. He gets up and talks to people, convinces them of things. So I'm sure in the back of his mind, there's that little piece of him that still thinks he can convince anybody of anything. He did it for decades. So yeah, but that might be what undoes him if he doesn't hush. Really, he's rambling.
Definitely. Well, he is definitely a talker. He likes to talk, so we can all tell that. All right, Gigi and Joe, thanks so much for coming out. We have to sign you guys off. Michael and Tracy and I will still be with you after the break, so stay with us. You are watching Law and Crime. We'll be right back. I'm Anjanette Levy, and thanks for joining us for this hour on Law and Crime. We are waiting for court to resume the cross-examination of Alec Murdaugh. We're awaiting that and looking to see more of it once the lunch break ends. But until then, we are taking your questions. So keep them coming to us on YouTube, Twitter, and in our Facebook, and we will get to as many of them as we can. With me this hour, Tracy Walder, a retired CIA agent and FBI agent. Also, Sonny Slaughter, a former Homeland Security official and law enforcement consultant. And Michael Bryant, a host here at Law and Crime and also an attorney. So guys, thanks for being with us, and thanks to everybody watching for being with us, and happy Friday. Let's take a look at some of that cross-examination. And this is by Creighton Waters, the Assistant Attorney General for the state of South Carolina. And he's asking Alec Murdaugh about his opioid addiction. A lot of people think the opioid addiction is made up, but it sounds like there are text messages and other things to back it up. So let's listen to what Alec Murdaugh had to say about it.
All right. And so she obviously told Paul, and Paul texted you, correct? About finding those pills.
That's correct.
In May of 2021.
That's correct.
And you've heard your sister-in-law, Marion, testify that Maggie called him the little detective about the pills. You heard that testimony in this courtroom?
I did hear that.
All right. So did they start to watch you like a hawk and get on you about your pill usage during the month of May?
No.
They did not.
No, Mr. Waters, this battle that I had with addiction, it had been going on for years. And so they had been watching me like a hawk for years before May. May was just one occurrence where I let them down again.
All right. They had been watching you like a hawk for years. Is that correct?
About my pill addiction, yes, sir. That is correct. I promised Paul that as soon as we finished with his criminal case, that I would go to rehab.
All right. So Alec Murdaugh being asked about Paul, the little detective, and we saw text messages earlier in the case that showed that Paul was contacting his father in early May and saying, I'm at Edisto Beach. We need to talk. Mom found a bag of pills in your briefcase. So there was some stuff going around about this in the month or so before the murders. So Michael Bryant, what do you make of this? Because it almost seemed to me like he was talking about not feeling well the day before the homicides when they were in Columbia for the baseball game. He was staying in the hotel. It was hot out. He was feeling a little dope sick. I mean, is the prosecution maybe looking for something to couple with this financial stuff that maybe he was trying to get off the pills again? They had been on him, and that added to stress.
Yeah, I guess. I know that he testified he was sort of coming out of, initial step in his personal rehab. Remember, he tried to rehab himself many times without going to a facility. But it seems to me it's like a swing and a miss, because let's assume the prosecution uses that as an additional stressor. You'd have to move from stressor to psychotic, in my opinion, to shoot your son and your wife as a result of those stresses. I'm on pills. I'm going to get off the pills. And now I got these financial pressures on me. I know I'll kill those closest to me. And it makes no sense. I thought, we've heard so little about, this idea that there might be a drug cartel involved, that he was somehow helping others, and the cartel would then wipe out his family to prove to him, hey, we're serious about this. You got to come clean with us. But we've stayed away from that in terms of any supportive or corroborative testimony. Maybe it's because he can't even tell his attorneys what's going on because of his fear of what they might do. I don't know if the defense might not use that. There have been enough seeds planted. Maybe during closing, they could use that suggestion that, he couldn't even tell his son what was going on. Buster, his lone remaining son now. And so we don't even know for sure what's going on, but we know he was scared to death, and this cartel made a point by killing his wife and his son. To me, that's as believable as, hey, I'm freaking out over being on drugs and money problems. I'll kill my family.
I'm surprised the defense hasn't said something like, Paul and Maggie were killed to send a message because he owed drug dealers money. He was stealing. I'm surprised they haven't gone there. I know that there was some testimony that the Cowboys weren't worried about the money he owed them because they knew they would get paid. That's what Agent Owen said. But I'm still a little surprised that hasn't been brought up, because if you're going to act like we don't know who killed them, well, that's a pretty good reason.
Yep.
Let's get to more of your questions. This one comes from Bello Enzo from YouTube. How come Waters doesn't continue on the reason Maggie was there? There's testimony from her sister saying he called her up there, and he denies it now on the stand. Sonny, I wonder what you think of that, because Marion Proctor said that she urged her sister to go to Moselle because, Alex's dad was having some issues. She didn't necessarily want to go, but Marion said, yeah, I told her she should go. And now Alec is saying he didn't summon Maggie to Moselle.
I think it's I think the whole case is convoluted. And the fact that he is on the stand and he's saying that he didn't ask her to come, and the family members are saying that he did. And Maggie's hesitant about always going there. I'm just not sure what to make of Alex's testimony altogether and why she was there. But the tight time frame really gives credence to some of what I think the prosecution has been trying to do and failed to do with tying them all together. Why Maggie was there is just beyond me. The whole case is just, he's a hot mess, and so is all the reason behind all of this.
I think Tracy Walder said her daughter said that earlier, that Alec is a hot mess. I think we can all agree. I mean, he's like addicted to opioids. He's stealing millions of dollars. He's robbing Peter to pay Paul. He's trying to keep up appearances. He's worried about the family image. He's got Paul, in the boat crash thing. I mean, just, oh my gosh. And then, whatever else is going on that we don't know about, but I think we would have heard by now. Let's get to another question. Pooter Bug's mom from Twitter. I don't know what that means, but interesting name. Tracy, could Alec have been sitting in the golf cart when he shot Paul? That's why it looks like a 5'2" person shot him. I think some people have wondered that. It seems like it would be a weird place to sit to shoot somebody, because we heard that Paul was ambushed inside the feed room. So do you think it's possible that Alec was shooting from the golf cart, and that's why the physics guy said, yeah, the shooter's like 5'2", 5'4"?
Yeah, I think that actually is entirely possible. I've shot, out of vehicles before, and out of sort of golf cart types of vehicles. So I don't think it's impossible. And it probably makes the most reasonable sense in terms of explaining that height of the bullet trajectory. But we have to remember, and I thought the prosecution did a good job of this, basically that individual was not cleared for court testimony on trajectory analysis. He was someone who did accident recreation. So I don't put a lot of stock into what he said. Now, I've thought about it, if Alec was on his knees or something like that, the height still wouldn't work out. So really a golf cart is perhaps what would work out. However, I'm surprised that they haven't used that yet as a counter to what was presented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but to me, I still don't know if that would be possible, because I thought that there was some stippling. And you would have to Paul was in the feed room and was ambushed, they said. That's the testimony on the record. And then they said he took a couple steps toward the door, I'm just trying to play this out in my mind and figure out how this happened with Maggie not flipping out and seeing her son being murdered and trying to do something. So I don't know. I guess it could have happened, but I just don't know. Or maybe leaning over the golf cart. I don't know. All right, just some thoughts from me. Let's get to our next question. Lina Wildsey from Twitter. Did Maggie know PMPED was looking for missing money? Do you think the state will physically demonstrate the number of steps in the time stated to the jury? Oh, this is a lot of questions, Michael Bryant. So let's just do the first one. Do you think Maggie knew that PMPED was looking for missing money?
You know, there's some question as to when she learned what she learned. The real question is, did she know enough at that time and then let Alec know that she knew? And if so, did that trigger him? I don't think the answer is clear enough in terms of what she actually knew, but it seems pretty clear that he knew what everybody else knew. And as he said, I lied, I cheated, I took advantage of all these people. And in his mind, in his testimony to this jury, it didn't matter. That was not the kind of thing that was going to set him off. The more people that knew bothered him, he had some concern. But again, his testimony is that was not the triggering event. His paranoia related to drugs, not the money.
And I think she clearly, obviously, she didn't want her husband using drugs. And the little detective, Paul, was trying to keep his dad, in line and in check. Libby Bertrand from YouTube. Why does Alec not trust SLED? Sonny, we all thought that was really interesting since Alec Murdaugh had a really good relationship with law enforcement. His family was basically part of law enforcement in the area for a century. But he gets in the car with SLED and he doesn't trust them.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I didn't see him apprehensive when he was in the car. I didn't see him feeling leery about his conversation with SLED. And that has really been an interesting question. Why didn't he trust them? What has happened? He talked about his paranoia with the drugs, but he has never said anything about being pulled over, being having to go in for questioning or anything related to his relationship with law enforcement that would cause me to believe that he really had this trust of law enforcement at all. He seemed rather comfortable to me. And I just think that he is, that is just another excuse from him as to why he lied. I just don't believe it.
Could be. I mean, because he seemed rather comfortable. I mean, he got in there with his lawyer and talked to the cops, talked to SLED. They're a different ball game maybe than the local guys, but still, I mean, they're there to investigate the murder of your wife and child. 789 from YouTube asks, did forensics check the golf cart for blood? I don't think they did. I don't remember hearing about that. We would have heard about that had they done so. So I don't think that happened. Stevie O from YouTube asks, why did the prosecutor not realize why when visiting his mom, he spoke to Shelley about the time duration of the visit and law enforcement questions before he found the massacre at the home? I'm a little confused by that question. So he spoke to Shelley about the time duration and they questioned him before he found the massacre at the home. I don't know. Am I reading that clearly, Tracy? Do you understand what they're asking?
I'm so sorry. I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah, we're going to get back to you on that, Stevie O. Sorry, let's try another one, Tracy. I'm still stuck yesterday when Alex said I didn't intentionally hurt Maggie and Paul. If he's conniving, why did he say it? i.e. legal reason. If he's not, it felt like a confession. That was interesting too. He said I would never intentionally hurt them. Did you view that as a possible confession?
I didn't. It kind of goes back to where he said, I did him so bad, instead of they did him so bad, right? This is someone who seems to, he goes on for a long time and kind of hangs himself with his own words. But, in terms of that statement, I'm not sure that I view that necessarily as a confession. However, if he is going to then try to potentially explain his actions away, which he is sort of doing by his drug use, and I do believe that he was heavily addicted to opioids and other things, then perhaps he was experiencing, I guess, this, out of body. It wasn't intentional. I did this because I was on this drug binge and, dope sick, like you said. And so perhaps that is what he's talking about, but I don't view it as a confession.
Yeah, I think he's got a weird way of speaking. I mean, he's got like his own style. Like he
really does. He's southern to the heart.
Or they did them so bad, or I did them so bad. Whatever he said, for somebody who's a lawyer, he speaks, in a very different way. It sounds like.
Sounds like a dipshit.
Side doc.
Call it what it is.
YouTube question: isn't the emotion on stand demonstrating that Alex is reactionary? He gaslights as well. Can the jurors see this? Michael, do you feel that Alec Murdaugh is misusing emotion? Is he gaslighting from the stand?
I'm a fool for it if he is, because it seems so genuine to me. I don't know the motivation for it, and I don't think we should discount the aw shucks factor here. You mentioned that, Anjanette, that his way of speaking is it's just kind of aw shucks,
Yeah.
Everybody on the jury, though, is kind of from that area, right? So maybe it doesn't play as well with them. It's just like that's the way we talk here.
Or they're supposed to be
it's
from
just
there.
kind of, everything's kind of got a soft pedaling nature to it. And I think that when he busts out and cries like he does, I'm amazed. It looks like real emotion to me. I just don't know what's motivating.
It very well could be real emotion, but that's the question. What is causing it? We don't know. We're going to take one last question, and this one comes
wasn't lying
from
because of the pills. That's not it.
KN8113 from Twitter. Do you think it will help Alec if the prosecutor... actually, no, let's not do that one. Diane from Facebook. Sorry about that. Funny how Alex couldn't remember things in those earlier days, but today he has no problem answering in full detail. Seems he's giving more detail than asked. Isn't too much a bad thing? Sonny, is he giving too much detail where he can offer all this stuff and back then he's like, yeah, I don't know, and whatever?
I think he is. I think he is talking entirely too much. And I think he should be limited in his answers. He should stop being so combative and just answer the questions that are being asked. I'm sure his lawyers are losing their absolute mind with him on the stand and some of the things that he is saying, because I'm like, okay, don't do that. Don't say that. I just think he should just answer the questions. If he doesn't know, just say, I don't recall. But I think he is actually talking.
And they need to stop him from monologuing and dialoguing.
I understand why.
Questions.
I understand the emotion, the thought of his wife and son being murdered. And if he is reliving that in his mind, if he can picture that at the moment, and I can't understand whether he did it or not, that is not emotional. But I just really think he should stop talking so much and stop trying to explain things and allow the prosecution to ask their question, state the answer, and if he wants to add something, wait until his attorney is asking.
Right. Well, let me tell you that you let Bubba and Grady out, and the first thing they do is they go over to those pines and they do their thing. I mean, it's just like, okay, nobody cares. But I agree with you, and I want to know what Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin are thinking, because we've got a camera on them, and I keep looking, and I just keep watching, and I'm thinking, my God, self, I really wanted to be a fly on the wall at the jail when you guys were meeting with him the night before this happened. And I really want to know what Dick and Jim are thinking, because sometimes I'm just like, I don't know what they're thinking, but I can kind of imagine. All right. This has been great as always. We appreciate everybody joining us for our question and answer session. Testimony is about to resume soon in the trial of Alec Murdaugh with the cross-examination of Alec by Creighton Waters. So it's continuing. I'm Anjanette Levy, and again, I'll be signing off. Michael Bryant is taking over, and I will see you again next week in Walterboro, South Carolina. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I don't feel right now like they've made a ton of headway into proving anything. About the well, I mean, I think that basically the legal experts, I think right now, are seeing things the same way that we're seeing them, and kind of picking up on the same vibe that we're picking up on. For a lot of us, I think there's plenty of people that are watching right now that are feeling kind of mixed feelings about it. They're not sure exactly where to go with this, whether or not there was damning evidence, or if there is proof enough to make it clear that Alec was lone gunman, which I don't believe is the case. I don't believe that he was alone in this situation. I definitely feel like he played a part and was instrumental in making this happen. However, I feel that at the end of the day, we're never going to get a chance to really get a full accounting as to what happened at the kennels that day. But needless to say, but I'll say it anyway, Alec was definitely involved. Jeremy, what's up, buddy? No, I've seen the HBO series, but I haven't seen the new Netflix one yet. So But yeah, I guess the new one, they do a kind of a playoff of some of the same facts, but they don't quite go into great detail about the some of the other things. So the thing with Alec, though, that we've established throughout the course of these questions is pathological liar. The guy is a con man. He definitely, the HBO one, but he definitely knows how to bend people to a narrative, right? And that's what he's giving the courts. We've established that he lies to law enforcement, right? And he started right off the bat. There was no hesitation. He, in the car, post brains on the ground of his son, is already fabricating a story. Papa is still, lifeless in the kennel, and he's already coming up with an alibi, basically, and trying to dictate the narrative, which is what he's done. And as and through his litigation, he's done a phenomenal job of that. He's had an incredible track record of taking these cases home, and putting them to bed, and then proactively stealing all the funds from these cases. So the thing that we know about Alec Murdaugh is that he's a garbage bag of a human being. We've already know that. He's a narcissist at the highest level, incredibly self-indulgent. And I can tell you right now that through my addiction, when I was going through it, the world that you live in when you're in your drug addiction is only about you and the drug addiction. That's what it's about. It focuses about it. Everything is about that. And if he's saying that he was doing 1,000 to 3,000 milligrams of Oxycontin and Percocet a day, anyone that believes that, I'm sorry, you've never been in that world. That's crazy. That's insane. You'd be dead. You're not doing it. Especially back when Oxycontin, this is what we're talking about, these times when he was into it. I mean, it's those 80 milligram Oxycontins. He's saying that he was doing 100 pills a day. That's insane. It's insane. But he's playing this whole, I was a drug addict. That's why I lied. I lied because, I had some pills in my pocket. They're not going to, you think they're going to, I mean, he knows enough to know that his son and wife are laying dead in front of them. They're not going to pat him down. Well, do you have any, he already said, I have a gun, I'm going to go get a gun just in case. Right. And then he checked for a pulse on Paul. I mean, the things that he said, right. When he got down to the kennel, he said that he saw brains when he pulled up. He saw his son's brains out of his head. He tried to turn Paul over. His head was blown in half. His brains would come out. He tried to turn him over and then check for a pulse. Apparently his cell phone popped out and he said he started doing something with it, but he stopped immediately. He didn't say what he was doing, just said he was doing something. Now remember, he's at the kennels, and previously at the kennels, he had already said that the dogs weren't going crazy because there was no one there that they didn't know. He left that pretty ambiguous. So, and then he went to Maggie, then called 911, right? Then called family, got off the dispatch, and decided that then he had to call,
put something on the record.
His squad.
Yes,
So,
Your Honor. Thank you.
there's some housekeeping they have to do real quick, and I want to hear what
During
they have to
cross-examination of Mr. Murdaugh, he had testified that in relation to the financial crimes, that he had tried to meet with the Attorney General's office, and that on multiple occasions, and that he had, from the get-go, had always been willing to sit down with them. He was specifically talking about the financial investigation and the charges which he received as a result of those investigations. Following up to that questioning, that answer, Mr. Waters then went to Mr. Murdaugh's testimony and the information he provided about being down at the kennel. And he said you had never provided that information to law enforcement and other people until today or yesterday. And Your Honor, that is a direct violation of Dole v. Ohio, where the Supreme Court said that cross-examining the defendant about his failure to have told an exculpatory story after receiving Miranda warnings at the time of his arrest is a due process violation. The court goes on to say the defendant's post-arrest silence cannot be used against him, violates due process. And that's exactly what happened on cross-examination. So I want to make clear the grounds for objection. Also would like to move to strike the question, strike the answer, and get a curative jury instruction that they are not to consider any and failure of the defendant to come forward with exculpatory information after his arrest relating to the murder charges. Thank you.
Mr. Waters.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Clearly, this defendant has given statements on multiple occasions, and that operates as a waiver under Doyle. Additionally, my question was not so limited as Mr.
That's
Griffin
Doyle
says.
v. Ohio,
It was, in fact, the
1976.
defendant who made a point of saying that he had repeatedly tried to talk and put that in issue, at which point this was directly responsive to what he brought up. Additionally, this was also, all that was discussed were public statements of his counsel, who was an agent on his behalf and attributable to him. So there's no Doyle violation here. If Mr. Murdaugh had claimed his right to silence from the beginning and had kept that throughout, then the state would be precluded from commenting on the exercise of his right to remain silent. But one thing we know about Mr. Murdaugh is he has not remained silent at any point during this process. And he's the one that brought up this false claim that he had been begging to tell the kennel story, when in fact he did not do so till yesterday.
Doyle primarily addresses the issue of post-arrest silence. If an accused is silent,
Yeah, the right to remain
following an
silent
arrest,
is
then
where they're going. The Miranda
it's
rights.
improper to comment on the post-arrest silence. It does not allow a person, an accused or a person who's suspected to give contradictory information or to voluntarily give a statement or to voluntarily give a misstatement, as has been acknowledged here. I do not find any Doyle violation, and the record is protected. I certainly understand the defense raising any and all possible issues that can be raised, and you've done it here. The record is protected, but all motions are denied. Let's bring the jury.
Right. So, Chris, you hit that on the head. His fear for Pawpaw, right? It was because Paul, because of these threats. Where, at the end of the day, though, he said that Maggie should have been nowhere safer than with Paul. But Paul was getting threats, and you wouldn't believe the kinds of things people were saying, the things people were threatening him. But there's still killers out there. Am I wrong? Right? If that's the case, people that violently, brutally murdered his family are still out there. Like, is there a continued investigation? Are they still looking for these murderers? Is Buster in protective custody or not protective custody, but in like some kind of like, some kind of protective custody of any kind? Is his sister, is Alec Murdaugh's sister, are they guarding his mom, just in case? I mean, let's look at the bigger picture. We get caught up in the litigation of this all, and it's just kind of like, all right, man, like facts are facts, man. You're a liar and a cheat. You got in with the wrong people, and this is what it came down to, Whether or not you pulled the trigger, you definitely were instrumental in it happening, which is why all the weird runaround and all the lies and stuff happening, trying to tell the caregiver about the time, make sure that you know that I was here for a half hour.
You may proceed.
You don't
try to cover your tracks unless you have tracks to cover. You know what I mean? So,
Murdaugh, good afternoon.
Jump in here, share the stream if you would, please, people. And I appreciate everyone for jumping in with us today as Alec Murdaugh is on the stand in this case of South Carolina versus Alec Murdaugh.
At what point during that interview in the car with Dave Owen that you decided to start lying about the murders of your wife and son? I'm going to pick up this video real quick. Not going to play the whole thing, but we'll start from 2 minutes and 9 seconds.
We'll just start it out, take your time.
Like when I came back here, I pulled up and I could see him, and I knew something was bad. I ran out. I knew it was really bad. My boy over there, I could see it was. And I could see his brain on.
I ran over to Maggie. And, actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. I tried to turn him over, and I don't know. I figured it out. His cell phone popped out of his pocket. I started to try to do something with it, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down really quickly. Then I went to my wife, and I could see.
Did you touch Maggie at all?
I did. I touched them both.
Okay.
I tried to do it as limited as possible, but I tried to take their pulse on both of them. And, I called 911 pretty much right away. And she was very good. I talked to her. I told her I was going to get off the phone to call some family members. I did that.
What family members did you call?
I called my brother Randy, and I called my brother John. And I tried to call a little boy, a real good friend that's right around the corner from here, but I didn't get him.
What all was around Paul when he walked up?
Blood.
Anything else?
There was some body thing, yes, sir.
Like any other evidence? I know you said the phone fell out of the pocket, but did you see anything else that didn't belong or shouldn't belong or that wasn't part of Paul?
No, sir, no, sir.
How about Maggie?
No, sir.
You didn't see anything around them? What made you come out here tonight?
I went to, my mom's a late stage Alzheimer's patient. My dad's in the hospital. My mom gets anxious when she does. I went to check on them and Maggie. Maggie's the dog lover. She fools with the dogs. And I knew she'd gone to the kennel. I was at the house.
Just to be clear, you say you hadn't made the conscious decision to start lying about your wife and son's murder right there, correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let's continue on.
Mr. Waters, I can't tell you exactly when that decision occurred.
Okay. You can't describe to the jury the moment you decided to lie about your wife and son's murder.
I can't tell you exactly when that moment occurred.
I left the house and went.
You did say earlier that when David Owen asked you about your relationships, that was a trigger point, correct?
Well, that was certainly one of the things that contributed or made me paranoid.
Okay.
Now, there were already things that had gone on that occurred, as I said, that put me in that mindset.
Yeah.
But exactly when I decided to lie about that, I can't tell you.
So the things again, you talked about your dope paranoia, the fact they'd taken GSR, and you talked about the advice of your law partners and Sheriff Hill and Greg Alexander, and then you talked about your distrust of SLED somehow from the circumstances and demeanor of this interview right here, correct?
No, my distrust from SLED didn't arise from this interview. My distrust for SLED arose from a couple of things, and it's really several things. It arose from the way they had been involved SLED had been involved in the investigation into Paul's criminal charges, and they had been involved there was an issue that had gone on with some rumors about Buster and Paul, they had been involved in that where, you know, Buster nor Paul had anything to do with what I'm talking about. And SLED never said that, even though they told their lawyer that, they never say that. And there'd been another incident where SLED had charged Greg Alexander, my friend in this case, they charged him. And in fact, I thought the agent that was involved in that was David Owen, but the charges against Greg Alexander were they were so wrong that my dad and I made a conscious decision, even though he was a career prosecutor, made a decision to go to the courthouse and sit with Greg Alexander while his trial went on, because
This was 10 years ago, right?
it was a while back,
Yeah.
you know? But
You don't know if Dave Owen was at SLED 10 years ago.
no, I checked on that, because that night, the officer who was involved in that case in bringing clearly manufactured charges against Greg Alexander.
You're saying the night before you sat down for this interview, you were asking somebody about whether or not something about Greg Alexander 10 years ago in the wake of what had occurred?
Oh, no, I didn't ask anybody.
Okay, so that wasn't what you were discussing when you were sitting in this car.
No, I wasn't discussing that. I'm just telling you that I thought David Owen was the same agent that was involved in that case. Now, I learned later, because I checked on it, I learned later that it was a different David, SLED agent, first name David with a different last name. I learned that later. I'm just saying that was all part of that process going on in my mind.
So you're saying that you're sitting here right now thinking that this Dave Owen and this circumstances and demeanor of this interview, you're thinking that guy had been involved in the prosecution or investigation of your friend 10 years ago.
I did.
Okay, so here's a new one you just mentioned to us, correct?
No, that's not a new one. That's part of,
The circumstances are new. I mean,
No,
that's fairly
no.
specific, don't you think?
well, no, sir.
I mean, the story keeps evolving. Keep going.
No, you asked me about this, Mr. Owen. What I said is part of this whole, I mean, Mr. Waters, the whole part of this whole process involved my distrust for SLED. That was a big part of my distrust for SLED.
Yeah, we can all see it on your face in this interview, can't we?
I don't know.
But you said what you just said a little bit ago, that wasn't the lie. That wasn't the conscious decision yet. So let's keep going.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't believe that it was. I don't
Okay.
know exactly when
All right.
I made the decision to lie about that.
All right.
All right?
Well, if you see it, let me know, okay? I want to go forward.
To my mom for just a little while. Tried to call her when I left. Texted her, no response. When I got back to the house was obviously nobody was in there. So I figured they're still up here fooling around. Paul was gonna be getting set up to plant. Our sunflower seeds got sprayed and died, and he was refiguring to plant the sunflower seeds. So I came back up here and I drove up and saw and called.
Had Maggie and Paul been arguing over anything?
No.
What was their relationship like?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. How about yours and Maggie's?
Wonderful. I mean, I'm sure we had little things here and there, but we had a wonderful marriage, wonderful relationship.
And yours and Paul's relationship?
As good as it could be.
How old was Paul?
22.
Okay.
So that was the moment, right there, that line of questioning, just asking some very general questions about your relationship. You mentioned that before, didn't you, Mr. Murdaugh? Is that the moment right there? Is that the look on your face when you decide to lie about an important fact in your wife and son's murder?
I don't know. As I said, Mr. Waters, I don't know the exact point that I made that
You
decision.
specifically earlier mentioned that very exchange as somehow triggering you to lie about the last time you saw them alive.
No, I'm not saying that that's what made me lie. I'm saying this whole set of circumstances caused me to be in a state where I had paranoid thoughts.
Okay.
That normally, Mr. Waters, I could take a deep breath and make go away in a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds at the most. And on this night, I wasn't able to do that. But all of those things that I mentioned, I believe contributed to that.
Okay. Any more you want to add now, since you keep adding them?
I'd be glad to answer any question you have.
Well, I mean, I'm asking you. I mean, the factors have gone from yesterday to today, and now even after lunch, we got some new ones. So anything else you want to add right now as to factors?
Mr. Waters, I don't believe that I've added any new factors. I believe that's what I said yesterday.
All right.
I've explained some of those factors because of your questions, but I don't believe I've added any factors.
Okay. All right, let me move this forward just a little bit.
Okay, so most of this was stuff from between a couple of them, but not.
Yesterday in great detail about the boat case, which you brought up on the 911 call and to Daniel Green, and then of course in this first interview, correct?
I did mention the boat wreck.
All right, and you described that. Do you remember what you said in this interview about the boat wreck?
Not
About
specifically.
specifically the other people involved in the boat wreck? You don't remember specifically? Do you remember specifically? I guess you said no.
I remember talking about the boat wreck, and I
Don't
know
know
that I talked about the boat wreck.
All right. Well, I'm going to play it now from 1714.
any direct threats between any of the people on the boat specifically, but I do think there's been a small amount of yip-yap between a couple of them, but not recently.
Okay.
What was the term you used for that? Small amount of yip-yap?
Yeah, and just to be clear, Mr. Waters, there was never, ever a point in time where I thought that the people that were involved in the boat wreck did this to Paw and Maggie.
Okay.
I've never thought that.
All right. I never thought that, but it's literally one of the first things that you said out of the 911 call.
Nah, that's not what I said. I never, ever, ever under any point in time believed that those kids that were riding in that boat or their parents or their families. I didn't believe that any of the families, the people that were involved in the boat wreck had anything to do with hurting Maggie and Paul.
Okay.
But I can tell you that at that time, and as I sit here today, that I believe that boat wreck is the reason why Paul and Maggie were killed.
Okay.
And I'm certain,
So
I believe that.
It was random vigilantes, the 5-2 vigilantes. Huh?
Now, what I believe, Mr. Waters, is I believe that when Paul was charged criminally, there were so many leaks, half-truths, half-reports, half-statements, partial information, misrepresentations of Paul that ended up in the media all the time. And when I tell you the social media response that came from that was vile, the things that were said about what they would do to Paul, they were so over the top that nobody would believe anybody would get on social media and do that. But I believe then, and I believe today, that the wrong person saw and read that.
Okay.
Because I can tell you for a fact that the person or people who did what I saw on June the 7th They hated Paul Murdaugh, and they had anger in their heart. And that is the only reason that somebody could be mad at Paul like that and hate him like that.
Gotcha. All right, so we've got now.
But that's why I did then believe it was the boat wreck, and I believe now that the boat wreck
all right, so
had something to do with it.
All right, so we've got random vigilantes because of the boat wreck.
Now, I don't know that they're random vigilantes.
Well, you just said it wasn't the family or the kid, or the kids or the family of the other kids in the boat, right? So you're saying it's somebody off of social media, and you don't have any evidence of that, do you? You just believe that. You're just telling that jury that as you try to explain the lie that you told for the first time yesterday. Isn't that right?
No, sir, that's not right.
It's not right. All right. Well, let me ask you a question then. So what you're telling this jury is that it's a random vigilante.
That's your
the 12-year-old, the 12-year-old 5'2" people that just happened to know that Paul and Maggie were both at Moselle on June 7th, that knew that they would be at the kennels alone on June the 7th, that knew that you would not be there, but only between the times of 8:49 and 9:02, that they show up without a weapon, assuming that they're going to find weapons and ammunition there, that they commit this crime during that short time window, and then they travel the same exact route that you do around the same time to Alameda. That's what you're trying to tell this jury?
You got a lot of factors in there, Mr. Waters, all of which I do not agree with, but some of which I do.
All right. You testified earlier that after this happened, let me back up just real quick. When you were driving to and from Alameda, why were you in such a hurry? Why are you rolling 70, 80 miles an hour down that dark, beat up road?
I wasn't in such a hurry.
You weren't?
No, sir.
Show you what's been marked as States 573. See if you recognize this.
I do.
And tell the jury what that is.
It's Mag's car.
Right. What's it in front of?
The house at Moselle.
And what's between the house and the Mercedes?
The golf cart.
Is that where it was on June the 8th, to your recollection?
No, sir.
Where was it left?
I mean, it was near there, but that's not exactly where it was. No, sir.
Okay, where was it?
Where we would normally park it would be a little bit closer to the shed. I mean, a little bit closer to the house, to the bushes.
All right,
when was that photograph taken?
Well, do you recognize when it was taken?
No, I don't recognize. No,
You
sir.
wouldn't dispute that it was around the time in the aftermath of the murders, would you?
Aftermath being when?
I'm asking you.
A day, a week, an hour?
I wasn't there, Mr. Murdaugh. Do you recognize those?
I recognize the car, I recognize the house, and I recognize the golf cart. But that is not, that's not exactly how it would have been that night.
Can you describe to me then where it would be different?
Well, it would be more in line with, first things first is when we drove the golf cart, or when I drove it for sure, and I believe when the others drove it, you would come in and you would go across the little brick walkway that's in front of this. So if I would have come in and gone this way, or I would have come in and gone this way, this is not a place that any of my family would have normally parked. And so what I'm assuming is this obviously is taken at daytime. And what I'm assuming is it was taken when SLED came to the earliest it was taken was when SLED came to the house the next day, which I believe the testimony is in the afternoon. And at this point in time, that golf cart, I would assume, would have been moved several times, but that's not how it was.
Well, where did you leave the golf cart when you got out of it around 8:49?
In the manner in which I just talked about.
Okay, well, help me out again so I understand. You would have come around this way or that way, but where was it? Where would it end up?
It would have been, in this picture is facing to the right.
Oh, I got you.
The night that I drove it, I believe I parked it facing to the left.
I understand.
Would be customarily how I did it. And I believe I did it that way that night.
Okay. Well, that's all right.
And that is how I would have gotten into it.
All right. That's a very specific memory. Thank you. All right. At this
Well, that's
time, the
just how it
state would
normally
offer states 573 and evidence.
Admit it without objection.
Very briefly.
And see, Mr. Waters, you can see in the picture now that you bring this up on the screen, if you look to the right, you can see the actual steps. And just to the left of that would be where the little brick patio starts. So where I would normally park it, you would roll across those bricks and the end of the golf cart would be just past those. And we all normally parked it that way because the way you charge this golf cart is if you see that back seat that's sitting, you can see the edge. This is a 3-seat golf cart and you can see the back seat. And a lot of golf carts have the charger, this sits on the floor or something. This golf cart has a charger that's plugged in and a part of the golf cart. So you flip that seat up and it plugs in. And the outlets are right up there by the door.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about that?
I'm going to answer any questions you have, Mr. Waters.
No. Well, I appreciate all that information and great detail.
Sustained.
All right.
It's just never parked that way by the family.
Have the computer back, please. What's up? Mr. Murdaugh, I'm going to put up the second interview. This would have been June the 10th. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I do want to go through a couple of things with you, okay?
Anything you want to go through, Mr. Waters?
I apologize. Got ahead of myself. I want to do one last thing on the first one. For the record, I'm going to start.
I forget the guy's name.
I'm going to start it at 23:55. This is the first interview.
Amy's been having trouble with her She's been having trouble with her stomach and her tooth. I'm not positive. It was sort of a routine visit, and I can't remember. She told me the name of him, and I want to say Gordine
Okay.
is who I think she saw.
So was she back home around supper time? Or 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock?
I don't think she got back quite that early. I think she got back a little bit later than that.
Okay. What did you do today? Were you at the office or?
No, I was home. I came home. Paul and I messed around. I was up at the house. I laid down, took a nap on the couch, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes. I got up, I called Maggie, didn't get an answer, and I left to go to my mom's. She had said she might ride with me, but she normally doesn't when I go over there. And I think I texted her.
There, when you repeated the lie that you decided?
Was that the moment that I
Was that the
decided
moment you
that?
decided to lie to mean old Dave Owen?
I don't know. As I told you, Mr. Waters, the exact moment that I decided to lie, but at that point in time.
But you did lie
obviously,
there, correct?
I did.
And she's very good about answering the phone, so that was odd, or calling me back. So that was odd, but it wasn't that big a deal.
All right, I'm gonna go to the second interview. It's been previously admitted. Let me ask you this before we start. You stated earlier during your direct testimony that after these crimes happened, you were around family, family was around you, your law partners were around you pretty much every minute after that, correct? Every waking minute. Didn't you say that yesterday?
Yes, they were for a long time.
All right. And this second interview was 3 days later, is that right?
That's correct.
And in no time with any of your close friends and law partners and family, do you confess the truth? Do you?
No, I did not.
Do you say, hey, man, I think I messed up. What should I do about this?
No, I didn't.
You're not telling that lie to anyone, are you? Until yesterday.
Excuse me?
You're not telling that lie to anyone until yesterday, are you?
Not telling what lie? Saying I tried to tell somebody that I was lying?
All right.
Hang up.
So is it? And
All right, I'm going to move this to approximately 24:56.
went to go to the red thing, getting,
Correction, I'm at 1228.
He doesn't like to go to doctors, making him go get his blood pressure checked. His feet had swollen up recently.
Wow.
So, that was a big, huge deal.
Okay.
We hung around the house for a little while. I know that Maggie went to the kennels. I don't know exactly where Paul went, but he left the house too.
Okay. How did Maggie get down to the kennels?
I don't know exactly, but on normal occasions, she would drive a buggy, drive a four-wheeler, or very common for her to walk.
Okay. How about Paul?
Paul wasn't much of a walker, but he would use all of the others.
Okay.
But it could be anyway, I don't know exactly. I wish I could help you with that.
So they left and went down to the kennels.
Well, Maggie went to go to the kennels.
Okay. Paul left.
And I'm assuming, Paul left because of,
Gotcha.
what happened. I'm assuming Paul went to the kennels.
Okay. And what did you do once Maggie and Paul left?
I stayed in the house.
Okay.
And I was watching TV, looking at my phone, and I actually fell asleep on the couch.
Okay. And what time did you?
I don't know exactly what time I woke up, but when y'all get my phone, I think one of the first things I did when I got up was call Maggie because I was going to my mom's. And I know I texted her because I checked my phone. And what time did we say the text was, Jim? It's like 9:06.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I got it written down for you.
I showed you the other night, didn't I?
Yes, sir. I got it.
So, I texted her. So I called her just before that. And she didn't answer at that point. And I left to go to my mom's.
Okay.
Y'all will just have to look. I'm not sure if I called Paul.
Well, and that's why we're getting the phone so we can nail down the times and everything.
Pretty much all of that was lies, wasn't it?
The part about me not being at the kennel was a lie.
Well, also not knowing that Paul went down there, not being sure, that was a lie too, wasn't it? You're putting some detail on this thing, aren't you?
Not knowing when Paul left. Everything about me not going to the kennel was a lie.
And you're able to just do that so easily and so convincingly and so naturally, don't you?
That's not for me to judge.
That's true.
It's an odd story.
I'm going to get to where I'm going.
Right now.
So do y'all have any good clues?
So we're trying to put a rush on that to get an answer quick, and hoping that's going to tell us something.
By evidence, is it things you think are going to be helpful?
Well, the shot shells out there, the casings, the DNA swabs that we took from the door handle to see if anybody touched the door handles, any other places that we think somebody may have touched while they were out there. We're trying to collect DNA from that and analyze that, which at the conclusion of this, what I'm going to also ask is that we get a buccal swab, the DNA swab from you. Your DNA is going to be there, but we need to eliminate it once it's developed.
We don't need that unknown that it actually is a family member.
No problem.
We have talked to close to 100 people trying to track people down, and we're still tracking people down. And that's why, who Paul was with.
I want to tell you one thing while I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Paul was really an incredibly intuitive little dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was like a little detective. And
He was like a little detective. Is that what you said?
That's what I said. And he was very intuitive, like I said.
And that was what Marion described as Maggie's term for how he was and keeping tabs on your pill usage. Wasn't that correct?
That was what Maggie said about him.
For some reason, you decided to bring that up in this interview, didn't you?
I mean, that was a trait of Paul's personality. I mean, I think anybody who knew him would tell you how intuitive he was.
Got it. You going 3 hours of video or something?
All right. For the record, I'm at 46:30.
Oh, I don't collect it.
well, thank y'all
Yeah.
very much.
So, Mr. Allen,
You don't have to call me miss. You just call me Alec. Thank you for that courtesy.
when you and Paul got back in the house, Miss Maggie's there, and y'all eat supper, which has been prepared. And you said you laid down and took a little nap, and when you got up, Maggie and Paul was gone, or did they leave when you laid down?
I believe that I'm not sure.
But they weren't there when you woke up around the 9 o'clock mark or so when you made the call to Maggie to let her know you wanted to.
No, nobody was in that house when I left.
So, and just trying to narrow that, the last time that you saw Paul and Maggie is when y'all were eating supper.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Your answer was yes, sir. Is that correct?
That's correct.
About to go to the August 2021 interview, but between that June 10th interview and the August interview, you were not working very much. Is that correct? If at all?
No, I definitely wasn't working very much. I think I was working a little bit, but no, not very much at all.
Did you go to Johnny Parker to borrow $250,000 in order to cover the Ferris fees? So
I did.
You did?
I did.
Did you tell him what that was for?
No, I did not tell him what that was for.
Did you go to Russell Lafitte at Palmetto State Bank and get $350,000 in order to help cover some of the Ferris fees that you had taken to send to Chris Wilson?
I did.
And did you get those fees before you signed any paperwork or documentation?
I've heard testimony about that in this case, but I can't tell you the specifics of that.
Okay. You don't recall that?
Do I recall when I signed paperwork? No, sir.
You don't recall that you got the money a month before you had to sign any paperwork?
No, sir, I don't recall that.
Call your phone being in the console, but
I'm not disputing that, but I don't recall it.
Did you go to your best friend, Chris Wilson, and convince him to cover $192,000, the remaining $190,000, in order for him to send that email to your law firm as if those fees had been there all along?
I spoke to Chris Wilson and did not have the full amount of the fees. And I got Chris Wilson to put the remaining fees in his trust account.
And when you did that, you didn't tell him the truth about your life. You just asked him to cover you,
No, I
correct?
didn't. I did not tell him.
And he agreed to do that because of his belief of who you really were, or who he thought you were.
He agreed to do that for whatever reasons. I assume that was a big part of it.
And once that $600,000 was transferred, Chris Wilson sent an email to you saying those fees had been there, were in his trust account, correct?
That is correct.
And then you forwarded that email to Lee Cope and Jeannie Seconder, correct?
I know I forwarded it to Jeannie, and I've heard that testimony about forwarding it to Lee Cope, so I believe that's correct.
Why'd you not get it all from PSD?
Because at that time, there were limitations on how much I could borrow because MAGS was passed. And so I was limited. I couldn't get a loan against Moselle and had to get a loan against Palmetto State. I mean, against Edisto.
Going to the third interview. All right, I'm going to go to 1745. Apparently having some technical difficulties. Jury's seen this, so I mean, again, you repeated the same lies over and over again.
I did.
Effortlessly and convincingly.
I don't know about that.
No, they can see it there.
Agree with that.
Nobody yelled at you.
Nobody yelled at me. Nobody, none of these guys were ever discourteous to me. Like,
Nobody what?
I said, none of those guys were ever discourteous to me. You made a comment earlier that David Owens was mean or something about being mean, and he was never mean to me.
All right. But you decided to lie in part because you distrusted David Owen.
I distrusted SLED in general, and I particularly distrusted who I thought was David Owen at the time.
Okay.
Who turned out not to be David Owen.
So wait a minute, I want to be clear. You're saying now you thought that this was some David Owen that had something to do with Greg Alexander 10 years ago.
No, sir. And I'm not saying that now. I've said that all along.
Uh-huh.
The person that I saw and watched in Greg Alexander's trial that was clear to me was just, it was terrible what they did to Greg Alexander. And the person at SLED who was responsible for that was a guy named David. All right, and I'm not even getting into his last name. I thought that David Owens that night was that guy. Later, down the road, and it was a while, I checked into that and I found out that I was mistaken, that it was not David Owen.
So when we went back and we spent a lot of time going through that first statement, you're telling me now that you were sitting there thinking that this was a completely different guy the whole time, and that was on your mind during that entire interview.
Yes, at the time, I thought that David Owen, no, I didn't think David Owen was a different person. I thought that David Owens was the person that my dad and I had watched. Just, I mean, my dad and I truly thought evidence was manufactured, and I thought it was David Owen, and I was wrong about that. But that's what I thought that night.
Any other factors or details you want to add about your decision?
I want to answer any question you have, Mr. Waters.
I mean, any more?
Do you have any more questions, sir?
No, I mean, any more about your decision to lie. I mean, I just want to, let's get it all out now. Okay.
If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
All right, well, I do. Tell me about the replacement blackout. You initially told law enforcement that you weren't sure whether or not there was one, correct? Correct?
Oh, no, sir, you're absolutely wrong about that.
Mm-hmm. What did you say then?
Shortly after this, it became being told that Paul's gun had been stolen. And the one you heard talk about being stolen from the thing. And I'm not sure how I learned this, but I learned that somebody, I believe SLED had gone to John Bedingfield, who made those guns, and could only find paperwork for 2 blackouts, one of which they were saying was stolen in 17. And that's what they were telling me. And I was certain and told them that I was certain that there was a third one.
But initially in June 8th and June 10th, or June 10th, you were saying that you thought that y'all had replaced it, and then you kind of wavered and then eventually said you did replace it, correct?
I don't believe that's correct. No, sir.
Believe that's correct?
No, I don't believe that's
Did you
correct.
say to law enforcement that you thought that the third gun, the replacement blackout, had gone missing in Christmas of 2020?
It did go missing in Christmas of 2020.
So you're telling them that one also had been missing 6 months prior, correct? Answer my question first, and then you can explain. Did you all tell law enforcement that that gun had been missing since Christmas time?
I told law enforcement that when we looked for it at Christmas time, we could not find it.
Okay.
And that was accurate. We looked for it when we were trying to shoot hogs, when we had a group of people out there, and we could not find it.
Okay. But you now know that it was there as late as turkey season.
I know, sir. I know that Will Lovin and Paw had it right before turkey season, like Will Lovin testified to.
So it was around, actually.
It was around there at some point in time there, yes, sir.
So you're saying it got stolen a second time, or you just don't know?
No, I'm not.
The 12-year-old stole it a second time?
I never said a 12-year-old stole any gun, Mr.
Sorry, the
Waters.
5'2" people stole it a second time?
I don't know that it was stolen. I just know that when we looked for it at Christmas time, we couldn't find it. And I know this, I know that I hadn't seen that gun in a long time. I've heard the testimony that people who were at my house using guns and hunting with us all the time, Rogan, Buster, they didn't, I can't remember about Buster, but there were several people who didn't even know that gun had been replaced. So that tells me that that gun did not stay where our regular guns were. And I know that I didn't see it there. And that tells me that they didn't see it there.
Of course you didn't see it there because it's got to be missing, correct, Mr. Murdaugh?
Ask that
Yeah,
question
one more
again.
circumstance for your latest story to work is that it's got to be missing as well. It was when you told law enforcement it was missing at Christmas time. Now we've had testimony at this trial, and now you're still claiming that you never saw it. It must have been kept somewhere else. Where else would it have been kept?
It could have been kept anywhere, Mr. Waters, the way Paul did guns, the way guns were handled around there. I was terrible about that.
You're terrible about that.
I should have been stricter.
But you know that that third gun was fired right outside the gunroom door in turkey season of 2021, correct?
I know that now, based on what Will Lovin said.
And you know it was also fired across the street at y'all's shooting house around that same time, don't you?
No, sir, I don't know that, but I know that I would assume that it was fired at the shooting range, but I don't have any reason to believe it was done in close proximity to that time.
A few months go by, a couple months go by, and you get confronted about your thefts from the law firm, correct?
September of 21.
And unlike June the 7th, when Jeannie confronted you, this time they had unassailable evidence, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, they had,
No wiggling out of this one, correct?
I didn't try to wiggle out of this one.
Well, you've been wiggling before, though, right? You wiggled when you stole your brother's money twice, correct?
Well, I admit almost all of these things, Mr. Waters, but that's one of the things that I take dispute with,
Which one?
that I stole that money that you're referring to.
You're going to dispute that? Let's hear about that then. Tell me why you dispute cashing that check twice.
I don't dispute cashing that check twice.
But you're going to tell this jury that you accidentally didn't realize that you were supposed to be receiving some $125,000 check, $120 however $1,000 check, 2 times. How many $120,000 checks do you receive?
I got that check, and this is several months after. I mean, you can look at my finances and you can see how I was doing. I didn't balance a checkbook, but the fact of the matter is, when I got that check, I asked about it, and I was told mistakenly that it was for me, that I had done. Participated in that year-end thing, which I did sometimes, not often, but sometimes. Apparently, a new check got cashed. I cashed that check. Then a year later.
Yeah, where did you keep that one for a year?
I don't know where it was. It was obviously in my desk, but Mr. Waters.
So you found it in your desk?
No, I didn't find it.
Well, you said it was obviously in your desk. So you remember that? You remember finding it in your desk?
No, I remember when we.
Did you go to finance and say, I just found this year-old check? Is this right?
No.
No, you took it to the bank, didn't you?
No, sir. I didn't.
Not allowing Mr. Murdaugh to answer the question.
So when this came up, when this came up, that check got cashed. There's no way that I can have a check in our law firm with the way accounting is, and that I can cash a check twice and think that's impossible. So to cash a check that's already been checked, there's no question it's going to throw that off. what happened is I had we used to get a rent check, we get little checks, I'd have checks, and they pile up, the small checks. That check got mixed in and it got sent to the bank and it got deposited.
Keep going.
And that was a year after.
Okay.
But I do dispute that I stole that money. That money.
All right. Well, I mean, you brought it up. So any of the other money you dispute stealing?
No, sir, you brought it up. I was just telling you that was the one I disputed.
All right. And you heard Ronnie Crosby and Mark Ball testify about that, correct?
I heard Ronnie and Mark testify about what they thought about it. Yes, sir.
All right. You testified yesterday about the side of the road.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And then you heard the testimony during the state's direct case about what you said on the 911 call. You heard that, didn't you?
I did hear that.
You heard the 911 call where you said you'd been attacked by an unknown assailant and described him?
I did.
And you saw the video from the ambulance where you said you'd been attacked by an unknown assailant and described him?
I did.
And you heard the testimony from Ryan Kelly where you, again, went into detail and described this attack from an unknown assailant?
I did.
And you heard the testimony about your interview on September 6th with law enforcement, in which you went into great detail and again described this unknown assailant?
I did.
And you heard the testimony, and in fact, the image was put in about how you sat down with a sled sketch artist and spent a period of time with her going forward and creating an image of the supposed assailant.
I did sit down with it. I was in the hospital and they came in, sat down with me, asked me a bunch of questions. I answered their questions, and
yes, you did. You
it
sat
came
there.
it came up with a composite. Yes, sir.
Sat there and answered their questions just as effortlessly and convincingly as you've been trying to do for the past 2 days. Isn't that correct?
No, sir, that's not true. In that hospital, I mean, I couldn't sit still. I was standing up. I was walking around. I was using the bathroom with the lady sitting right there. I was 2 days into not taking, 3 days into not taking pills like I had been. So no, it wasn't effortlessly. But I mean, I told him what I told him. I don't dispute that I lied.
It was all lies, though, is the point, correct?
It was.
I mean, you're saying withdrawals, but you still were able to pull off lies in great detail.
I lied to them.
And the lie that you told of an unknown assailant was to try to make people think that the quote real bad guys were back again to finish the job. Isn't that true?
No, sir, that's not true.
That's not the effect that you intended that story to have? Did it have that effect on people that you knew? Isn't that the exact effect that it had?
I don't think there's many people that believe that. No, sir. I know the people that were, I mean, the people that were closest to me didn't believe that. So, no,
When
sir.
accountability is at your door, Mr. Murdaugh, bad things happen. Isn't that true?
When accountability is at my doorstep,
Go ahead.
bad things happen. What do you mean by bad things?
June 7th happened. September 4th happened.
I don't believe that June the 7th happened because accountability issues were at my doorstep. Now, I do believe in September that I tried to get a man to help me kill myself because issues were at my doorstep.
Every time, or I'm sorry, for the first time in your life of privilege and prominence and wealth, when you were facing accountability, each time suddenly you became a victim and everyone ran to your aid. Isn't that true?
I disagree with that, but I mean, what you're
Shame for you is an extraordinary provocation. Isn't that true, Mr. Murdaugh?
Hang on, let me just finish this. You seem to be implying 2 dates, June the 7th and September, and talking about accountability issues. And I mean, to me, those two things are totally different. There were no accountability issues on my doorstep on June the 7th.
That's what you say.
And in September,
Not what other people say.
I was trying to, well, no, I mean, been a lot of people in September, that wasn't designed to gain me sympathy. That was designed for me not to be here because I didn't want my son to have to deal with the wake of the things that I had done.
But that's not the story you told. The story that came out of your mouth right away was the story of you getting attacked by some unknown assailant while you were trying to change a tire and run flats.
Well,
that's the story that you told.
That is the story I told, but that's because the man who shot me did not shoot me that day as I intended. And I had to have a story as to how I got shot. So I lied.
So you lied. And you're saying that people in your family and your friends didn't instantly believe that whoever these 12-year-old marauders were back to finish the job.
You keep using
and it happened just 2 hours after you've been confronted by Chris Wilson.
I think probably some people may have thought that when it first happened, but I think like Randy, Ronnie, Mark, those guys, I think they knew very quickly that this was not, I think they knew this was something that I'd done.
Shame for you, I asked this before, but shame for you is an extraordinary provocation, isn't it, Mr. Murdaugh?
Shame for me is an extraordinary provocation. I don't like to be shamed.
The prospect of humiliating the legacy is an extraordinary provocation to you, isn't it, Mr. Murdaugh?
What do you mean by an extraordinary provocation?
It affects you deeply. It's your biggest concern, is it not?
No, that's not my biggest concern.
You're a middle-aged man like me?
I'm 54 years old. I'm not sure. You look like you're in better shape than me, so I don't know.
I was actually a couple of years behind you in law school, but we never knew each other, did we?
I never knew you, no, sir.
Had a very successful career up until this point.
You know,
simple question.
And the answer to that is no, Mr. Waters. I was an addict for more than 20 years.
All right, so making millions of dollars over a decade is not having a successful career. Is that what you're going to tell the jury?
No, that's not a successful career. When you
okay, well, let me put it
no,
like this.
hang on. Let me just.
All right, go ahead.
You know, it may have been what you perceive as a successful career, but, you know, I was the one who was fighting that. You don't have a very high self-esteem when you're an addict. So I don't deem myself a success.
Would you agree that at least outwardly you're perceived as successful?
I made a bunch of money, if that's what you're wanting to get at.
No, I'm actually asking about the perception. You were perceived as a prominent,
I tried to
powerful
be.
lawyer.
How I was
You
perceived.
were president of the trial lawyers.
I sure tried to be.
You lived a life of possessing authority.
Possessing authority?
Yeah, we saw the badges. You just admitted of your prominence in the legal community.
I don't think that I lived a life of possessing authority. I never saw myself as that way.
You don't think you lived a life of privilege?
I think I was very privileged.
And as we move to June of 2021, you were suffering from a drug addiction.
Absolutely.
Your father was terminally ill.
When?
As we move to June of 2021.
No, sir.
He was very ill.
He was very ill.
And you were coming to a point of financial crisis.
I was having financial issues like I'd had many times in the past.
Mr. Murdaugh, are you a family annihilator?
A family annihilator? You mean like, did I shoot my wife and my son?
Yes.
No. Would never hurt Maggie Murdaugh. I would never hurt Paul Murdaugh under any circumstances.
Say that.
Excuse me?
Say that, but you lied to Maggie, didn't you?
I did lie to Maggie.
You lied to Paul.
Sometimes.
You lied to your father.
I'm sure I did at some point.
Did you tell him all the stuff you'd been up to over the years before he died?
No, I didn't tell him.
Did you lie to your brothers?
About financial things?
Yes.
I would have lied to Randy at some point, I'm sure.
Did you lie to him about the last time you saw your wife and son alive?
I did.
Did you lie to their wives?
I'm sure I did.
Did you lie to Marion Proctor?
Yes.
Did you lie to Bart Proctor?
Yes.
Did you lie to the Brandstetters?
Yes.
Did you lie to your best friend, Chris Wilson?
Probably.
Did you lie to your other friend, Barrett Bulware, when you took his money?
No, sir.
No.
I didn't lie like I told you. I didn't lie directly to him. I lied to him by omission, like we talked about him. I didn't talk to him. I didn't see him at that time.
Did you lie to your law partners?
I did.
Did you lie to them about the kennels?
Some of them.
Did you lie to Mark Ball?
Yeah, I believe, based on what Mark said, I believe I did.
Did you lie to Ronnie Crosby?
According to what he said, I believe I did.
Did you lie to Johnny Parker?
I don't believe I ever discussed that with Johnny.
Did you lie to him about the finances when you borrowed that money in July of 2021?
I don't know if I lied to him about. I don't think Johnny asked me. I don't think I had to lie to Johnny about that, so I don't know.
Did you lie? Well, you certainly didn't disclose to him the truth when you borrowed that $250,000, did you?
I did not tell him what I was going to use it for.
I mean, didn't we say before that not telling the whole truth is the same as telling a lie?
Sure it is.
You don't think that's a lie, though?
I'm just saying, Mr. Waters, I'm not taking issue with that, but I don't even know that Johnny and I mean, Johnny had loaned me money numerous times. It wasn't any long sit-down discussion where Johnny wanted to know exactly what I was doing with it. That conversation would have been, I needed it. Johnny was always willing to help me, and that would have been the conversation. So on that specific event, did I lie to him? I don't know.
Yeah, he ended up being out $477,000, didn't he?
He ended up being out a lot of money.
And thank you for your qualifications as to that. Did you lie to Lee Cope?
I don't know. I don't know if Lee Cope was around when I said that or not.
Did you lie to Danny Henderson?
I did lie to Danny.
Did you lie to Jeannie Seconder?
I don't. About finances? Yes, I did.
You didn't ever talk to her about the kennels?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Did you lie to Annette Griswold?
I did.
Did you lie to Christy Gerald, your other secretary or paralegal?
I don't believe she and I discussed. I would have at some point, I'm sure.
Did you lie to Michael Gunn?
I'm sure I did at some point, but I mean, Michael wasn't involved in any of this, so I don't know that any of this ever came up with Michael.
Did you lie to your clients? Did you lie to Pamela Pinckney?
I did.
Natasha Thomas?
I don't know that I dealt with Natasha, but I certainly lied about that.
Hakeem Pinckney?
Again, I don't know that I talked to Hakeem, but I certainly lied about that.
Arthur Badger?
I did.
The Plyler girls?
I'm not sure that I talked specifically to them, but I lied about that.
Dion Martin?
I lied to Dion.
Johnny Bush?
Yes.
Manuel Cristiani?
I didn't have any conversations with him, but I certainly lied about it.
Jamie Risher?
Yes.
Randy Drawdy?
Yes.
Jordan Jinks?
Yes.
Mary Duncan?
Yes.
Adriana Hay?
Yes.
Angel Gary?
Yes.
Christopher Anderson?
Yes.
Elise Mallory?
Yes.
Thomas Moore?
No.
You never lied to him? You just took his money. You never had to actually lie to his face, is what you're saying?
He and I never had a conversation, but I did take that. I did take that money.
Did you lie to Tony Satterfield just a couple of months before June 7th? We saw the text. You want me to get it out?
Just remind me. There's been a lot. Just remind me what it was.
I'll show you what's been marked as 463.
And I don't remember the exact date. So
that was in April of 2021. Is that right? Or you text him and tell him how hard you're working on the case, when in fact you had stolen millions of dollars from him? Tony Satterfield, who got up on the stand and told the jury about that?
I texted him on April 12th, so 5 weeks before June 7th.
Told him everything was okay. You're working hard, right? It's a complex case.
Yeah, I told him I was working on the case.
He was the son of your longtime housekeeper, Gloria.
I'm sorry?
He was the son of your longtime housekeeper, Gloria, who had served your family for many years.
That's correct.
And you stole millions from those boys.
I stole those funds.
And he and his family had started asking questions as we moved to June 7th. Didn't that happen?
No, I mean, there wasn't any rise in them asking questions. No, sir. I mean, he periodically checked in and asked me questions, but, you know, it had come out long before this, I believe in the Island packet, that there had been a settlement of $500,000. But I mean, that had been months and months, if I'm not mistaken. And so I didn't notice any uptick in Tony asking questions, and I don't believe that there was any uptick in Tony asking questions before June the 7th.
So you just gratuitously out of the blue decided to lie to him and send that text? Or were there things going on externally that caused you to need to head him off in the past before further questions started to be asked about money you couldn't pay back at that point in time?
Nah, I don't think there was anything. I mean, on April 21st, I don't know what external factors you're talking about.
Do you want to explain that one anymore?
Explain what?
Whatever you want.
I just want to answer your questions, Mr. Waters.
Lied to everyone about the side of the road, that people that came to stop to help and the ambulance folks and the 911 and Ryan Kelly and the composite sketch artist and all of them, correct?
I lied to a lot of people about that.
You know why people lie, Mr. Murdaugh? Because they know they've done something wrong.
For the most time, I did.
And you've been able to lie quickly and easily and convincingly if you think it'll save your skin for well over a decade. Isn't that true?
I have lied well over a decade.
And you want this jury to believe a story manufactured to fit the evidence that you brought forth just yesterday after hearing this trial's worth of testimony.
No, sir, that's not correct.
Mr. Murdaugh, we went through this for a while, but you remember at the beginning of your testimony, I asked you whether or not you agreed that trying to explain your presence on the kennel video was the most important part of your testimony before this jury. Remember that? And you said, oh, not the most important. I said, was it at least important? You recall that from yesterday.
Yeah, I recall you asking those questions, yes, sir.
And you agree it's important, don't you?
I agree that is an important component. But I think there's a lot of important components.
And you testified yesterday and during cross yesterday and cross today. It's kind of evolved on the fact of the factors that led you to decide to lie at some point during that interview with David Owen, correct?
I disagree with that. I don't think those factors have evolved. I mean, you've asked some more specific questions, but those factors are still the same factors. You may have asked questions and gained a little more detail, but those factors haven't changed.
But it was the dope paranoia. It was the fact that the deputy took your GSR. It was the fact that your law partners and Greg Alexander and the sheriff were telling you you needed to have a lawyer before you talked to police. It was a factor that you got in the car with Dave Owen and thought he was somebody else from some case 10 years ago, correct?
That believing David Owens was the person involved in the case that I talked about was one of the factors that caused me to distrust SLED.
All right. And then also you said that they started asking you about, in that first interview, about your relationship with Maggie and Paula. And that's one thing you mentioned as well, correct?
And that was certainly something that contributed to me having paranoid thinking.
Yeah, get this sealed. Are we good? Playing the Daniel Green body cam video, 2026.
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like. All right. Yeah, the police are here now. The police are here now. That's my brother. Okay. When was the last time you were here with them? Or talked to them or anything like that? It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but okay. I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that.
That was Sergeant Green, correct?
Yeah, that was Sergeant Green.
And at that point in time, SLED was not there. No one had gotten GSR from you. Your law partners or Sheriff Hill were not there.
That's correct.
No one had asked you about your relationships. David Owen was not there.
That's correct.
But you still told the same lie. And all those reasons that you just gave this jury about the most important part of your testimony was a lie too. Isn't that true, Mr. Murdaugh?
I disagree with that.
Nothing further.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break now. Please do not discuss the case. You may step down. Please do not discuss the case. We'll take 15 minutes.
All rise.
Question to you. I want to get your take on what we have just seen in this last hour, Sonny, with Alec Murdaugh being cross-examined. What are your big takeaways?
Alex Murdaugh is a liar. He lies easily, quickly. There's no excuse for it. He's always covering up something behind something else. He's a master manipulator. And while I'm still not sure that he pulled the trigger, I do believe that he is heavily involved in the murder of his wife and son.
And Sonny, what do you expect or what do you think we're going to see with the redirect from the defense?
I think the redirect is going to try to close up holes to say, yes, he is a liar. Yes, he did commit these financial crimes, but that the prosecution still has not completely tied the knot with the financial crimes and an actual murder. So you can be a criminal and a liar, but not necessarily a murderer. I think that's where they're going to go with all of this.
Great. Sonny, thank you for joining us. Gabriel's staying with me. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, more of Alec Murdaugh on the stand. So stay tuned here at Law and Crime. Okay, welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm your host, Imran Ansari, and we have been watching riveting testimony from Alec Murdaugh, who, of course, took the stand in his own defense starting yesterday, testifying, and cross-examination roughly going about 6 hours today. And the prosecution just commenced or just ceased their cross-examination, I should say. And we expect most likely some redirect. And this gives me a great opportunity as we wait for that break between cross-examination and redirect to bring in my guest and chat about what we just saw and what we saw today. So joining me in the studio here in New York City is Gabriel Sepulveda Sanchez. He is a trial attorney out of Los Angeles. And also now joining me for this hour is Bob Mata. He is a criminal defense attorney in Chicago and also has a great podcast that you should check out called The Defense Diaries. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. And Gabriel, I'm going to start with you. We have been seeing this cross-examination go through the course of this day. Within the last hour that you and I have been watching, at least in the studio here, what are some of your big takeaways from what we saw with the prosecution ending their roughly 6 hours of cross-examination of Alec Murdaugh?
I mean, it's obvious that the defendant is not credible. I think it was a little overkill with that. And yeah, we all know he's a liar. We all know that. But the question is he lying about killing his wife and son? And I thought the DA talked a little bit too much. He's a little bit too theatrical. And I think that the best trial lawyers I know, you just make your points and you let the defendant hang himself and you don't talk that much. He kind of, the focus was on the DA too much instead of the defendant. And I always think that's a bad idea. I think there's still some issues with the prosecution's case. What's the motive? Yeah, we know he's a liar. We know that. He's made that very clear. They could have shaved off 2 hours of cross-examination. They didn't need to do all that. They think it was overkill on that issue. We know he's not credible, but what's the motive? Just because you're a liar doesn't mean you would kill your own wife and son. So yeah. I think they're weak on motive, right? And I think they better figure out, they need to hammer that home a little bit. And just because he's a liar doesn't mean he killed his wife and son. I think I think that he's got a good defense lawyer and they can create some doubt. But the fact that he is a liar is not helping his case either. So, my opinion, it can go either way right now, the way I see it.
Yeah, no, Gabriel, I think there's some real credibility issues, and the prosecution was able to show that through cross-examination. Bob, I want to go to you. You're a criminal defense attorney. And of course, Dick Harpootlian and the defense team most likely had that very tough decision. And they were probably behind closed doors speaking with Alec Murdaugh and making that tough decision. Do we put him on the stand? And of course, we've now seen hours of testimony, both on direct and cross-examination from Alec Murdaugh. Just explain to our viewers, based on your experience, how do you get to that decision? Of course, a case is a case-by-case basis, but how do you get to that decision with your client as a criminal defense attorney of whether they're going to testify in their own defense?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, what I want the viewers to understand completely, that is completely the defendant's choice. The defense attorneys can scream and yell, no, don't do it, don't do it. At the end of the day, it is only one person's decision, and that's the defendant. So, of course, there were massive amounts of conversation that went on with respect to whether or not he was going to testify. And I'm sure both Jim and Dick gave what their opinion as to whether or not he should testify. But at the end of the day, if Murdaugh was dead set on testifying, they couldn't have stopped him anyway. So I think at that point, once they became aware that that was his intent, then what you have to do is game plan and try to figure out the most effective way to get him through it without him just getting slaughtered up there by the prosecution. Now, that's going to bring me to my next point. I've been watching 6 hours of Creighton Waters basically doing a direct examination. That there is very little cross-examination going on. When you're allowing the defendant to basically run the entire examination by giving 10-minute narratives, that is not how a cross is supposed to be. It's supposed to be with leading questions where you're basically just allowing them to say yes or no. That is very rarely happening in this cross. I've been stunned by it, and I've been tweeting about it for 2 days. It has not been an effective cross-examination in my estimation.
Yeah, and Bob, you know that your next point was actually going to be my next question. I was going to make that note because when you are cross-examining a witness like this, especially as a prosecutor in this case, or a case like this, you're not going to allow those narratives to go out there. You're not going to allow the defendant to necessarily explain and control the narrative on a cross-examination. That's your point, to go in, score points on those leading questions, and really knock out whatever was established, if at all, on direct. And now it's your opportunity to really go at the criminal defendant when they typically enjoy the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So I agree with you with that. But do you think, Bob, that there may be a strategy here from the prosecution, from Cretin Waters, that allowing Alec Murdaugh to sort of go on these narratives may be playing in the prosecution's favor because he's not credible?
I mean, maybe, but now it's over. I mean, there's going to be a redirect, and theoretically there could be a recross, but at this point, he survived it, in my estimation. I mean, look, we all know the guy's a liar. He's a self-admitted liar. He's a self-admitted thief. I mean, he laid on that sword. That's done. So at this point, we still need to try to figure out, is the guy a murderer? Because that's what this case is about. I mean, we're talking the entirety of yesterday's cross-examination was all about the financials. And I keep going back to this point. These jurors do not have notebooks. And if you don't understand the significance of that in terms of serving on a jury, we are now going into what, the 26th, 27th day of trial. There's been countless witnesses, and there's been a ton of information, including massive amounts of timelines and just cell phone data, GPS data. These jurors have not had the ability to write one thing down. And then when you just collapse that on top of the fact that you have a broken up narrative with respect to the state's case in chief, you know, where it's like, is this a murder case or is this a financial crimes case? I don't know, man. I'm coming hardcore on a hung jury with this one. All you need is one, and there's bound to be one person that either believes Murdaugh or just didn't understand the state's case.
Yeah, there's Bob Matos calling it as a possible hung jury. Of course, we're going to wait and see, and we're all waiting to see what's going to happen next. And what is happening next, Gabriel, is that there's going to be redirect. And we've talked about the cross-examination, whether it was successful, whether they really, as the prosecution, scored some points here. What do you expect to see after hearing and seeing that cross from the defense team on redirect?
We all know he's a liar. He's admitted to it. The defense lawyers are not disputing that either, I'm sure. But just going in and saying, hey, did you kill your wife and son? And you just really, because this is what this case is about. It's not about whether you're a liar or not. There's a lot of liars out there in the world, a lot of liars that are husbands, and it's about whether he killed his son and wife. And he's going to go on direct and put that issue out there and let the defendant testify about whether he did or not. And really, it's just about what the jury is going to believe. And I didn't like that cross-examination at all. I thought, like, I agree with everyone here. You know, your point of cross-examination, leading questions, get your concessions in. Yes or no? Yes or no? And let the jury make the decision. And I thought the DA was very theatrical, and he was doing a lot of talking. And I always think that you got to remember, as a trial attorney, it's not about you. It's about your clients. And it's about the state's case, or it's about the defendant's case. So I thought it was too focused on him. And I think I don't think it was a very good cross at all. And I think I'm leaning towards the defense in this case. I think the defense lawyer is going to get a good redirect, and he's going to put it out there. Did you kill your wife or son? This is what it's about. No. And to be honest, in my opinion, just looking at him as just trying to state as a lay witness, he looks, yeah, he's a liar. He's the most likable guy. No, but he comes off. This might be a part of his personality or whatever, but he doesn't come off as a bad witness. And I'm surprised that he didn't get destroyed on cross-examination. And he doesn't come off that bad as a witness, in my opinion. He's a liar, but he's doing all right. He's holding up on cross.
Yeah. And Bob, so you made a great point here that these jurors do not have notebooks. And we are now weeks into this trial. A lot of evidence before this jury, a lot of testimony before this jury. I just want to fast forward a little. I know we're waiting for the redirect here and possibly recross based on that redirect. But how are you now organizing yourself as a defense attorney in this case with this amount of evidence for summations? How are you going to bring it to the jury? And I said defense attorney, I should say, whether you're a prosecutor in this case or on the defense team, how are you organizing that evidence and getting it sort of in a package for this jury as you make your arguments? What would you do?
In terms of the prosecution, they really have to try to tie it together. You've got this motive that seems far afoot. I didn't love it when I first heard it, and I was hoping that they would be able to tie it in a little more closely. I mean, I see somewhat of a nexus. I see where they came up with it, but am I buying it? Not necessarily, but it's not about me. The question is, are those 12 jurors and the alternates buying it? And, when you've got a motive like that, and let's be clear, you don't have to prove motive. Juries like to know about a motive.
You may bring the jury.
So
Jury is present. All right, thank you. Redirect.
thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Murdaugh, we spent a long time yesterday and a fair amount of time today talking about financial misdeeds.
Yes, sir.
Have you been criminally charged for those financial crimes?
I have been.
You have pending charges
I
against
do.
you. You were asked specifically about $792,000 in Ferris fees that you diverted from the law firm. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And I think you were asked about an accounting or where that money went, and it went out pretty quickly, roughly.
Yes, sir.
And you recall testimony that over $500,000 went to Curtis Eddie Smith.
I do.
And what would that have been for?
That would have all been for pills.
For opioids?
Yes, sir. Specifically, all I was taking at that time was oxycodone and OxyContin.
And you were an addict, were you not?
I am an addict.
You are an addict. And did you repeatedly lie to those you love to cover up your addiction?
I did.
And were you concerned that you would be exposed if you didn't continue to lie about your conduct?
I did.
There were some specific things you were asked about, which I'd like to go over. One thing you had referred to a text message that you'd seen later on between Maggie and Blanca. Do you recall that?
I do.
And it's in the evidence as Defendant's Exhibit 54. And Doug, if you could pull that up, please, sir. And if you could highlight the Blanca text. Is this the text message you're referring to?
It is.
And I'll just read it. It says, T.Y., that's thank you. It says, T.Y., I'm waiting at Dr. Alex wants me to come home. I had to leave door open to Edisto, but trust Mexicans to shut a lot for me. His dad is back in the hospital. The last doctor claims not cancer, it's pneumonia. And then she has some faces. Alex is about to die. Hope he doesn't go down there to sleep. Alex needs to take care of himself as well. Is that the text message you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
And did Blanca share this message with you after Maggie was murdered?
Blanca ultimately she shared that with me. She first told me that, Maggie was worried about me, how much she loved me, and that she was worried about me, and I texted her.
Okay. Now you were asked, you can take it down, Doug. You were asked questions about conversations around the dinner table on the 7th about, well, didn't eat at the table, but around while you were eating dinner about Paul's health. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Alec, I'm going to show you two exhibits, Defendants 179 and 180, and ask if you can identify these two.
I can.
And what are they?
It's text from let's see, it's a text from Paul to me on May the 30th.
And then and what's 180? Exhibit 180 behind it.
That's a picture of Paul's feet.
Your Honor, would move Defendants Exhibits 179, 180, and the evidence at this time without objection, I believe.
Without objection, Your Honor.
Submitted.
Do you have 179? Or we've got, let me put it on the Elmo. Alan, do these this text message refer to Paul's feet swelling?
They do.
So if you'll do, you can pull it up. Like, go up a little more so we can read it. And it says, from Paul, and that phone number, is that your phone number?
That is. This is my phone number, 1227. My feet swole up. It has something to do with my blood pressure. Get me an appointment as soon as it's convenient.
And what's the date of this?
May the 30th.
2021, right?
Yes, sir.
And if, Doug, if you'll show the picture, I believe this is a blow up of the picture that's in this Exhibit 180. Can you pull out? Was that a picture of that Paul had sent you of his feet swelling up?
It is.
Is this what y'all discussed, when you're eating dinner?
Yes.
Okay.
Along with many other times.
You'd also, you were asked questions about your dad's condition and whether he was terminal or not. Do you remember that?
I do remember questions about him.
Okay, and gosh, Doug, I think it's the extended timeline. Is it states 5:30? Is that the right number?
States 520.
States 5:20. If you'll pull that up, please. It's already in evidence. And if you'll go to page 14. And if you'll blow up the entry at 142.54 at the bottom of the page. Is this a text that you and we'll, do you recall this is the text that you and other family members received about your father's condition?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it says, Daddy was just seen by the pulmonologist in Savannah. His opinion is dramatically different from the other doctors. He thinks Daddy has pneumonia and needs to be hospitalized to be treated for pneumonia. He thinks there could be an obstruction, but is more confident that it is all or mostly pneumonia. Daddy is being admitted to Candler St. Joseph Hospital now. He will have a study done to see whether or not there is an obstruction, and his treatment will be tailored accordingly. Right now, his pulmonologist does not. Go to the next page. Does not believe that he'll be getting radiation treatment, and in fact, the pulmonologist says that the palliative radiation treatment to try to open the airway is a Hail Mary. In his opinion, would most likely not work. Then it goes on to say, if he is right, and this is pneumonia, is much more treatable and can certainly give the immunotherapy a chance to work. Is that what you're referring to?
That's the text I was talking about that came when talking to Jeannie Seconder.
Okay. And and this wasn't a terminal diagnosis on the 7th, was it?
Not on the 7th. That was actually a little bit of positive news.
Okay.
That was short-lived, but it was positive at the time.
You can take that down for now, Doug. But stay on that exhibit. Now, you were asking, if you go to page 46, please, the same exhibit, 520. Page 46. And if you'll highlight and blow out the 902.18, Alec Murdaugh's iPhone shows. Now, Alec, do you remember being asked about these steps, 283 steps traveled during this period of time?
I do.
And I think you testified your belief was you're just getting ready to leave to go to your mom's house. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, that would have been the time I was right before I left to go there.
And you were, looks like you had made some phone calls during this period of time, correct?
Yes, the record show.
Alec, did you have Maggie's phone with you at any time between 9:02 and 9:06?
I didn't have Maggie's phone with me anytime that night.
And Doug, if you'll go to page 45, please. If you go to the entry at 8:53:15 to 8:55:32. What am I missing? Can you go? You're missing it. Go up one more entry, please. The one that, no, the one that records steps, please. And then take it all the way to the bottom, Doug. Thank you. This is in evidence. And this is Agent Rudowski's timeline. And it says Maggie Murdaugh's phone, iPhone shows 59 steps traveled between 8:53:15 and 8:55:32. Were you walking with Maggie Murdaugh's phone during that period of time?
I wasn't walking with Maggie's phone anytime that night.
And if you'll look at Agent Rudowski's entries, is there entry of her phone showing steps during any time between 9:02 and 9:06? Do you see any on this page from 8:53 to 8:55?
No, sir.
If you'll turn to the next page, page 46. Going down to your steps. Is there any recording of phone steps, phone recording steps, according to the data we now have for Maggie's phone at any point in time up to 9:02?
No, sir.
And had you repeatedly asked SLED to get the data from the OnStar, from the cell phones, to evaluate whether your phone and Maggie's phone were ever moving at the same time? You made that multiple requests.
I repeatedly asked David Owens about that information.
And when you asked that question, were you aware that Maggie's phone had been located, down the road, a mile, or half a mile or more? Is that right?
Yeah, I knew where her phone had been located.
And why was it important to you to get that information?
Because I knew that whoever had done this to them had Maggie's phone. And I knew that my phone and Maggie's phone and my car were never together. At any point in time.
Sure. Now, you have given inaccurate times in many statements to law enforcement in this case, have you not?
I did.
And we reviewed some of those in your direct examination. One was Paul getting to Moselle around 5 p.m. Do you remember that?
I do.
Were you lying to Agent Owens or anybody when you said Paul got there at 5 p.m.?
No, I wasn't lying to him. I thought that at the time.
And when you...
most of the times or a lot of the times when I gave times, I qualified them and say, but, you can look at this. I pointed them to my office, to the call log, to the key card like we talked about, or my phone, or my OnStar.
And when you told the agents that you thought you got to the office 8:30, 9 o'clock on that morning of June 7th, well, you were wrong, right?
I was wrong.
Were you lying?
No, I wasn't lying.
And when Deputy Green drove up and you had the first encounter with him, I believe you told him that you had been gone to your mom's house for an hour and a half. Is that right? We just heard it.
The last one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hour and a half. I think that is what I told him.
Hour and a half. And that the last time you saw Maggie and Paul was 45 minutes before that.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And when you spoke to Agent Green, Deputy Green, it was about, I think the records show they didn't arrive on the scene until 10:22 or something like that. Is that right?
That sounds right. I think that's what the records show. That sounds right.
And that were you lying to Agent excuse me, Deputy Green, when you told him what time, how long you thought you'd been at your mother's and the last time you saw Maggie and Paul?
No, sir, I wasn't lying to him.
Were you trying to mislead him in any way?
No, sir, not when Mr. Green got there.
Now, you've admitted the first few questions that I asked you yesterday and multiple times today that you lied to Agent Owen and Deputy Rutland and Agent Owen and Agent Croft, and on a couple occasions about your whereabouts following dinner, correct?
I did lie to them, as we discussed repeatedly.
And you've explained that it was just addiction, opioid-induced paranoia you just couldn't shake. Is that right?
That's right. You know, like I said, there's certain things, anything that make you paranoid, but I could get over it really quickly. But that night, I didn't.
And you had a bag of pills in your pocket, did you not?
I did.
And when you got down to the kennels, we're not going to repeat all that, but I mean, did you ever see anybody down there, anybody else?
No, there was nobody. There wasn't anybody down there when I was there.
And did you believe that the information, whether you were there or not there, would advance their investigation in any way?
No, I didn't. I didn't think that.
And why didn't you think that?
Because they were fine and doing good when I left there.
Did on the 911 call, do you remember that the call first went to Hampton?
I don't remember that, but I know that now.
And what we played here in the court in your testimony was the Colleton County handoff. Do you recall that?
I do recall that. I think at some point the part in Hampton might have gotten played too, didn't it? But I know the main part was the Colleton part. But it was like a minute into the call.
But initially it went to Hampton, and then subsequently it was transferred to Colleton.
That's right.
And then a minute or so into the Colleton call, you said, "I've been up to it now." You remember that?
I do remember saying that. I remember hearing it. I don't remember saying that, but I remember hearing it.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, that is accurate. And by up to it, at that point, I had gone all the way up to them at that point. When I first got out, I was close, but I wasn't right at them, I don't think.
Right. You were asked about the roadside shooting, and your intent was to end your life that day, was it not?
It was, no question.
And you were shot but not killed. And then you made up a lie to law enforcement about what happened, right?
That's correct.
Were you trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith by doing that?
Was I trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know exactly. It all had to come together so quick. I don't know that I was trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith. I may have been, but it was just, you know, I wasn't supposed to be there. And then I was.
When you say I wasn't supposed to be there, what do you mean by that?
I intended for him to, I intended to be gone. I intended for him to shoot me, and I intended to be gone. And the one thing, my main concern at that point was that I did not want Buster. I did not want Buster knowing that I had tried to do that.
Okay.
That was my motivation. in telling that story.
I see. Did you eventually voluntarily convey to Agent Kelly and others that that was a fabrication?
I did. After, I don't know, a few days in detox, when I finally got over those initial, just where I could just function, I think I told you first, then I think I told Buster, then I think I told Randy and John, and y'all arranged either the next day or 2 days later to come, and we called Ryan Kelly.
Well, you've lied to your family over many years, have you not?
I lied to my family about my addiction.
And you hid from them you were stealing client money, did you not?
Oh, I never, they didn't know anything about that.
And you've lied to your law partners about financial dealings and perhaps your addiction?
Yes.
And you've lied to law enforcement about not going down to the kennels after dinner, but eating dinner and taking a nap. Did you not?
I did.
Alec, did you murder Maggie?
I would never hurt Maggie.
Did you murder Paul?
I would never hurt Paul. If I was under the pressure that they're talking about here, I can promise you I would hurt myself before I would hurt one of them. Without a doubt.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Orders.
Police court. You said that you were concerned when you talked to David Owen about the bag of pills in your pocket, correct?
I mean, no, sir, I'm not saying that I was concerned about that. I don't think I told you I was concerned about that. I'm just telling you that was a fact. I had a bag of pills in my pocket, and that was one of the things, that was one of the many things that came together that night.
And you're trying to tell this jury that as a reasonable husband and father in this situation, concern about a bag of pills in your pocket was more important to you than telling law enforcement and narrowing the time when you last saw your wife and son alive. That's what you want to convince this jury of?
No, sir, because, I mean, the bag of pills in my pocket was not what I was concerned about sitting in there. It was, as I said, it was one of the many things that was going on. But I wasn't sitting there worried about those pills in my pocket.
You were asked about requesting the phone and automobile data. And that was because as a prosecutor and a lawyer, you had been manufacturing an alibi to cover your tracks.
No, sir, that's absolutely wrong.
You admit you were wrong about a lot of things in what you told law enforcement about June 7th. Correct?
I was wrong about things. Some things.
You were asked whether or not you voluntarily confessed to Agent Kelly But you only did so after being confronted with undeniable information, correct?
No, sir, that's not correct at all. What I was told is that, and I believe this came from Randy, what I was told is that SLED had come up with some information that seemed like it was consistent with my story, and they needed me to verify some things, is what they told me. And, you know, I knew that resources had already been wasted. I didn't want them wasting any more resources. And I told them the truth, but there wasn't any, nobody had presented me with any evidence.
And you just testified that you told Jim Griffin first, correct?
I believe that I told Jim Griffin first.
But at that time, you didn't say anything about those kennels, did you?
To Jim Griffin at that time? No, sir, I didn't.
When you testified on direct yesterday and you were asked about leaving the kennels with your new story in light of the evidence that's been presented in this trial, your words were, "I got out of there," correct?
I believe that's what I said, yes, sir.
And you also said during your testimony on cross-examination that you hurt the ones you love the most, didn't you?
I did say that.
Thank you. Nothing further.
In saying that, Mr. Waters, I just want to explain that answer. And he just asked me a question about what I said, and then I was going to explain why I said it.
All right.
As I told you earlier, you're implying to this jury and to me that was me talking about hurting Maggie and Paul. And that's not what that was. What that was is me saying, I know I hurt my brother, my partners, my clients, many of whom I told you I loved, all of whom I cared for. And that's what that was when I'm talking about how my misdeeds, how I hurt the people worst were the ones I loved the most.
I just asked you what you said, correct, Mr. Murdaugh?
You did ask me what I said, but in asking me that, you're putting an implication on there that I am explaining.
I just asked you what you said.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you. Nothing further.
And step down. I'll stand for a moment while council approach. Be seated, please. Well, we've come to the end of this week, and we will adjourn now and resume at 9:30 Monday morning. Have a great weekend. Do not discuss the case or allow yourself to be exposed to any information concerning the case. And we'll see you Monday morning. Have a great weekend. Jury's excused.
Order.
Everyone be seated, please. Regarding scheduling, first up Monday morning, Mr. Carpoolian.
Your Honor, we anticipate having 4 witnesses on Monday. They would probably average an hour apiece. So I would suspect by lunchtime we would be, no?
Early afternoon.
Early afternoon, I'm told by Mr. Griffin, resting our case. And of course, Mr. Waters indicated he'll have 1 or 2 reply witnesses.
Couple right now, Your Honor. Obviously, we need to assess that when they complete their case, but it would not be lengthy.
So that begs the question, what day next week do we do argument and charge?
Well, it's all unpredictable. As we can see from today, it's pretty unpredictable.
I'm guessing. I'd hope Tuesday. I don't think that's going to be, if they have any reply witnesses. Wednesday would be more of a target. I'm just saying a target date that we can begin thinking about in terms of argument and charge. To that end, are you going to set a time limit on arguments, or are you going to just let us do whatever we want?
I do not set time limits on argument.
With that in mind, Mr. Griffin and I mean, they get 2 arguments. We perhaps would like to split our final argument, which would, we think, with 4 weeks of testimony in there, it's going to be difficult for one person to digest all of that. There's no problem with that, is there?
All right. I would object to that. I think Your Honor's rules and general practices consistent with one counsel handling argument.
Your Honor, I've seen it done both ways, and 4 weeks of testimony, I think it's very difficult for one person. We only get one argument.
I've never done it, and I'm not inclined to do it. I'll look it over and consider it, but I'm not inclined to allow the defense to split closing arguments.
We could agree to a 2-hour limit. Does that maybe incentivize to look at this?
We'll look at it. I'm not inclined to do it. It's unprecedented, as far as I know, in the state of South Carolina. Except perhaps where you've been able to convince someone to the contrary.
I've actually objected to it when I was on his side of the courtroom.
Well, we have some days to think about that. Regarding closing arguments, I think we emailed you all a few days ago concerning any requested charge or charges that you might have.
Yes, we'll get those to you this weekend, if that's acceptable.
We'll try to do that, Your Honor, but we're preparing witnesses. How about Monday night?
That's fine.
Okay.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Nothing from the bench, Your Honor.
Okay, 4:49. We are adjourning for the weekend.
right, everybody. Well, I appreciate you for sticking it out to the end here. I've been in commute, but in connection here. So looks like we're kicking things back off Monday morning, right? So, man, how many hours was in total? I think it was like 11 hours, something like that. So far, that's crazy. Anyway, I appreciate everyone for being a part of the stream. I appreciate everyone's comments and engagement, for being so incredibly, informative with your thoughts and ideas as to how this could go, your theories. It's been fantastic. Possible. It should be wraps up.